Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. You're with Steve Wyss and Jonathan Fadugba, and we are on the eve of the start of Allsvenskan 2026. It's come at a rather, kind of difficult time, I must say, on the back of an international break, and right at the start of Easter as well. But I'm with Jonathan here, and Easter Sunday, you're going to get a few Easter eggs, Jonathan, hopefully. But this is really the prize in your basket, the start of Allsvenskan. How are you doing?
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone. Yep, ready for Allsvenskan 2026. So let's get into it. I'm excited. I think it's going to be an interesting year. A lot of ups and downs. I think there's a lot of upheaval going on in the league at the moment. You just said off air, Steve, if the predictions I've made on this table, I'd said it 2 or 3 years ago, you'd have laughed at me. So it just about sums up the state of the league. You got big underdogs who are sort of now champions. You've got big giants who are, maybe underdogs now. It's all switching and all ups and downs. So, I think it's going to be a turbulent league this season, maybe quite unpredictable. And I'm excited to get into it in a league that's kind of, we're on a crest of a wave, aren't we, at the moment, Steve, with Sweden qualifying for the World Cup. So Swedish fans are excited about the new season. And we are here for another year.
Yeah, we'll get into the team preview soon, but just briefly before that, I just kind of want to ask you where you think the state of the Allsvenskan is at the moment, really, because it seems to meander in and out of stuff. I think we were talking a few weeks ago off air about the teams that are going to be entering Europe this season. The coefficients for the clubs are so low. Apparently, it's the poorest ever selection of teams that's going to go into Europe from Allsvenskan. 72 million euros income this window, and just 15 million euros expenditure would suggest this is very much a huge selling league right now. Where do you see Allsvenskan at the moment?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, Steve. I think it's from the point of view of like prestige. I don't think it's in the best place. Even I do as a big Swedish football fan. I have been looking more towards Norway this last year or so. In terms of quality, I think teams like Glimt and others have kind of usurped some of the Swedish teams. And whereas I think a couple of years ago, maybe you could say Sweden, I thought had caught up maybe and was on a level. I do think it's been a bad year or so in terms of some of the bigger teams in Sweden. I think the performance of Malmö, for example, both in the league last season and in Europe, demonstrated just kind of really weak performances. Didn't do themselves much favors. Didn't do Sweden many favors on the sort of world or European stage. And I think that hit the prestige, the coefficient as well. Most importantly, with the amount of defeats they had. Don't forget the year before, Steve, we had Djurgården getting to the Conference League semi-finals, and that was a massive thing. The point about you're saying about the coefficients and the rankings, I mean, that is affected by the fact that we've got sort of like underdog landmark champions. So that obviously doesn't help the coefficient, but I don't think that's a bad thing because sometimes coefficients, who cares really? You want the underdogs and you want the stories and you want new teams to be coming up. So I don't think that's a big problem. I think it was a historic, romantic season for the league last year with Mjällby winning the title. So from that point of view, it's good. But I think that there is a massive, in education they call it a brain drain, don't they, Steve? But I think in Sweden you'd call it a foot drain. A talent drain that is making it very hard, I think, for the league to stay that competitive. Every single time there's a decent player, they're off pretty quickly. I've just been looking at some of the teams and ins and outs, Steve, and you've got someone like August Priska, who's now at Birmingham City for 7 million euros, and when you look at it, he barely had one good season in Sweden. So the players that you're kind of maybe excited about, that you want to have some momentum, they've gone in a blink of an eye sometimes. And I think that's one problem Sweden has. Although it's a good sort of trampoline league to bigger leagues, the challenge it has is retaining talent. And I think that's where it's sort of led to a bit of a decline in quality, which is reflected in the incomings and outgoings money-wise. Having said that, on the positive side, looking through some of the squads, as I did, Steve, preparing for this, there are some familiar faces that are still in the league, some good names that I thought would have left, to be honest. So, you take the rough with the smooth, and if there's one thing you can guarantee with Allsvenskan, there's always an unpolished diamond to be found just around the corner. So you can fully be confident that the league will always have exciting talents to watch. The question is, how long will they be around? One interesting thing, Steve, that I'm looking at the moment, obviously with the merging of HBO with TNT Sport from a broadcasting point of view, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work this season in terms of Allsvenskan TV rights. I was looking through HBO's Twitter feed, and there used to be Discovery, of course, which showed the highlights, and they don't seem to have any mention of Allsvenskan. So I don't know if that is a thing, and maybe the rights have gone somewhere else. That's something we probably need to look into. But as I say, it's always a league with upcoming gems, hidden talents. And I think if there's one thing about this league this season, Steve, like I said, the big dogs have fallen, and there's new blood coming up, and I think that mishmash means it's going to be a bit of an unpredictable season potentially, and that's probably reflected in some of my predictions.
Yeah, you're right. It really does feel like anyone good is snapped up very, very quickly now, even as if teams are willing to take a bit of a gamble on these players earlier than normal. I mean, the lad at Hammarby, we'll talk about him soon, that Como snapped up for about 12 million, would be an example of that. But anyway, 16 teams as always in the league. We wave goodbye to Värnamo, Oster and Norrköping were relegated, and we say hello to Kalmar, Västerås, and the other promoted team who I've forgotten already, Örgryte. How could I forget them? We have got 10 rounds of action before a mammoth World Cup break, which is going to be 5 weeks long, which means the season gets extended to the 29th of November. The Christmas lights will be on, Jonathan, by the time this season finishes. It's going to be a long campaign. A lot can happen. And we're going to get cracking straight away into the team previews here. We're going to start, as always, with the defending champions. Incredible story that Mjällby had last season. But I guess the big question is on everyone's lips. Was it a one-off, a complete Cinderella campaign, one and done sort of thing? The same sort of question was being asked about Bodø/Glimt when they won the first title in Norway. I'm really interested to see where you're going to put Mjällby in your predictions this season, because I feel like there's been a few different opinions about how it went last season. They won the league by a country mile, of course, by an incredible 13 points, 1 loss, 23 wins out of 30. Mjällby for 2026, take it away.
Well, I mean, you broke ranks on the Itinerary season preview, so I'm not sure if I'm going to obey your command there to talk about the champions necessarily. I think you wanted to talk about the team that you thought would win the league rather than the champions. But
I'm a rule breaker. What can I say?
Yeah,
sometimes
I will. Well, we could put Mjällby into context. I mean, the beauty of it, I suppose, Steve, from that point of view, is that the two of the biggest teams in the league, first and second, play each other on the opening day. So by the time most people listen to this, that game might have already been played, depending on when this is pushed out. Steve, we're recording on the eve of the season, but I think, Mjällby. What more can be said? It's almost a bit like Bodø/Glimt in some ways. I guess from a recap perspective, refresh people's minds, take you back 3-4 months ago, won the league for the first time in their history. The village team. You only have to go back through our archives and listen to our exclusive interview that we had with their former manager, Anders Torstensson, who came on the show to talk about how he turned that team into a title-winning team. First time in their history, Steve Mjällby, of course. And to be honest, although Anders Torstensson has sort of stepped down from his position as first-team manager, that was the big news over the winter break. There's been a bit of continuity in the sense that the new manager came from within, and that's another sort of former podcast. Karl-Marius Axum is the new head coach of Mjällby, and he will keep a bit of continuity in the sense that he was obviously on the first-team coaching staff. He was, mainly working on the attacking side of the game, the forwards, and working with that side of things. And he has a PhD in sort of scanning and that kind of thing, and he is a very educated man. And I think you got the sense, Steve, I remember when I spoke to him last summer, roughly around middle of last season, you got the sense he wanted to move into management, and he's got his wish. He is the now head coach. And the early signs are pretty promising, Steve. They've been fantastic in the early part of the season with the Swedish Cup, which always comes in before the season starts. They are in the final, and they had a landmark win in the semi-final to get there. So things are looking good from their point of view. They secured their place in that final by absolutely battering a couple of teams on their way to it. So I think that Mjällby, from that point of view, they've lost some players. I mean, I don't know if are you asking me to make my predictions, or are you asking me to just talk about them in general?
Well, first of all, what is your prediction for Mjällby for 2026?
Yeah, so if we're going straight into predictions, then yeah, I mean, there's no
hiding.
Yeah, there's no what's the way. Yeah, you've not built suspense, Steve. You've just gone straight into the champions, and I think Malmö will be champions. Quote a short, long story short, basically. I'm basing it on how they've been during pre-season. I think they've been fantastic. They've won pretty much every single game. They've won 5 in a row in the Swedish Cup. They absolutely destroyed Malmö 4-0. As I just mentioned there, in terms of some of the results they've had, they beat GAIS as well, 3-0. So they've been very, very good in pre-season. It looks like Kalmar FF has managed to keep that blend, leading the line, carrying on the great work of Anders Torstensson. The beauty of Mjällby, Stephen, in the sense of why I've got them to win the league this season, is just for the fact that they haven't really, I don't think, lost as many players as I thought they would. And obviously Kalmar FF, there was a lot of rumours about him maybe moving into management with or without Mjällby. So I know that maybe there'd been some interest in him. They've obviously given him the job, and maybe that makes sense from that point of view, because it gives him the chance to go into the Champions League, of course, for the first time in their history, lead the team into those qualifiers, and then also, of course, lead the team into the league and see if they can win back-to-back titles. And although usually I wouldn't predict a sort of massive underdog team to go and win back-to-back titles, I think Allsvenskan is a kind of league in a 30-game season with a big break, like you say, in the summer, that I think it could be potentially doable if you can retain some of your best players. Now, if we look at the ins and outs from Mjällby, Steve, Helmut Hansen is probably the biggest departure, one of them. He's gone to Dallas in the States. They've obviously lost their goalkeeper as well, no Tornqvist, I think, which is a bit of a blow. But really, I was quite surprised to see that they haven't lost, everybody from that squad. And when you look at some of the players, the likes of, if you look at the team that battered Malmö in that Swedish Cup game, when you look through the team, you've still got players like Tom Pettersson, you've still got Iqbal Noren, you've still got players like Elliot Stroud, who I think is probably at this point, you could argue, he's the best player in the league now, having not left. You've still got Jacob Bergstrom, who might play a more prominent role this season potentially. The Gustafssons in the middle, and even Abdoulaye Mane, who was so close to a big move to, I think at one point, to Olympiacos, that fell through. And there's no way I would have really thought he would remain in the league, if I'm being totally honest. So I'm surprised to see him still in the league. And so from that perspective, that is why I have got them to win the league. They've also added some players, a couple of which I think will go well and will be ones to watch out for. So all in all, they are my predicted champions.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it doesn't surprise me you have them high. I think that obviously the performances in the Swedish Cup have really quite impressed people. They absolutely smoked Malmö, I think it was 4-0. Carl, let's talk a little bit about. There's two main questions I want to ask you, Jonathan. Actually, Carl Marius Axum. Are we going to see sort of the same system that the previous manager, the legendary manager, used? And how do you replace the clear best goalkeeper in Allsvenskan in Tornqvist? Because, I mean, his expected goals prevented and stuff like that, the numbers were through the roof last year. So that is, can you replace him if you're Mjällby? It seems like there's got to be some sort of a drop off there. So yeah, what do you think about those two questions?
Well, I know you love your goalkeepers, Steve. So on that one, to answer that straight away, they've brought in Robin Wallander on a free transfer from Osters. Obviously, he was with Osters last season, and they ended up getting relegated, but they've seen enough to bring him in, and I think he's probably good enough to be their main goalkeeper. I'm not sure if he's the level of Tornqvist. Tornqvist is a fantastic player, so I know you'll miss him as someone who sort of loves your goalkeepers. On the question of Kalmar Axum, I think that, they'll play, all signs point towards keeping that kind of 3-4-3 system, box in midfield. I think Axum is a very tactically astute manager, someone who really thinks about the game, someone who posts a lot on X, Twitter, his training sessions and things like that in the past, and gives his perspectives, someone who takes you behind the scenes, and that was what sort of got him a lot of attention in the early part of his career. And from the people like us kind of reaching out for interviews, and you can go back through our archives and listen to that interview. It was a really fascinating interview. I think it's still got a lot of value. Some of the things he talks about, and obviously his studies in scanning and that kind of thing. I think that he'll have a huge emphasis on midfield, and I think that's an area that he's proven himself to be quite strong in. They will kind of maybe have a difference in the sense that I can imagine them being a little bit more. Maybe they might vary things a little bit, but Mjällby did that last season as well. They were very tactically, game by game, depending who they're playing. They were never set to one necessarily philosophy, if that makes sense. They'll mix things up. Even in the Swedish Cup, you've seen Science been playing like a 3-4-2-1 at times. Different kinds of formations, different styles, different players in different positions. At one point Stroud can play as a wing back. At one point he can play as a left winger. Things like that. So I think that the team will still be fluid, and I don't expect them to maybe stick to a set system. But I think for a lot of the games, you can expect three at the back, and as I say, maybe that box midfield, and then players around that, and then maybe a sort of target man up front, someone like Bergstrom. Maybe Mane at times might come in and drop into the centre forward area. So yeah, I think that's how things will look. They have got a young 15-year-old. I don't think we'll see too much of him necessarily. Called Zebedee Kennedy, who's meant to be quite highly rated. He is someone who is a forward as well. I don't know if we'll see too much of him. Max Nielsen and Aki Samuelson, who's coming as well from Norway. So those are the kind of main players. Kennedy's now turned 16 just recently, and a very highly rated young talent. So they may get some opportunities, but I think a lot of the team will be more or less as expected, to be honest.
Zebedee? What's this? The Magic Roundabout? That's some name, isn't it? Perhaps the biggest challenge for Mjällby this year might well come in the mid-season, where they will be in Europe. They're guaranteed at least 6 qualifying games, even if they keep losing matches. So the squad will be tested around sort of July, August time. Jonathan, is that a big concern?
It'll be a concern because they're the champions and it's going to be completely new to them. But as I said, I think they're going to have a long break as well, and I think they'll be able to deal with it.
Fair enough. Mjällby are your predicted champions for 2026. Interested now to hear who you've got in second place this season, Jonathan, because there's quite a few clubs that might stake a claim for it. Who are you going with?
Yeah, no, this one is probably a bit predictable in the sense that it repeats again last season, to be honest, Steve. So 1 and 2 from last year, I'm predicting 1 and 2 again this year. I'm going for Hammarby in second place. Now, this is the team that a lot of people are tipping to win the league, to be honest. So my prediction on Mjällby, I guess the one thing I could say about Mjällby, Steve, you asked me about the Champions League and if Europe could distract them. I think more maybe a potential problem is some of those big players that they've kept. I think they might leave in the summer. Someone like Stroud, Mane, are they going to keep them for the full season? I'm not convinced, to be honest. And I guess if I was going to sort of say their biggest challenge, it's going to be just that second season syndrome. Can you go again? Especially when it's not new anymore. That last year was the novelty of like going for a title. This year it's more like, there might be some games where they're actually expected to win, and how do they deal with that? And I think that's a little bit the same with Hammarby, to be honest, Steve. When I think they're going to get a lot of expectations, but I think the flip side is people are going to be expecting them to win the league this time. And I just think that's going to be quite a big challenge. One of the main reasons being the change of manager. I just think that's a big upheaval in the sense of having lost Kim Hellberg to Middlesbrough, and also some of the players they lost as well, Steve. I think they have lost a couple of, from my point of view, important players. But at the same time, Hammarby are going to be a very exciting team to watch this year because the new manager that's come in is another sort of former pod guest, Kalle Karlsson. He's finally got his big move from Västerås, where he was, and got them promoted, having been relegated the year before, Steve. So we had him on the show about a year ago, roughly, just over a year ago. And he's a very good manager, highly rated, and he's finally got his big move. And I think, they've kept some players, and there are a lot of talents in there that, you can look at and say they are going to be good players and big players this season. They have also, from my point of view, lost some players that I think will make it a little bit harder to maybe win the title. The other thing with them, Steve, is Hammarby are a very kind of, they used to call them sort of quite Spursy in that sense, where it's like, they can struggle to get the job done at times. I'm not sure if it's fair to call Spurs that anymore, having won a European trophy last year, of course, but then again, they might be getting relegated. So the moniker probably still just about suits. And Hammarby have that problem about them. They're for one of the big three Stockholm clubs. If you go and look at the number of league titles they've won in comparison to the rest of the clubs, it's not a lot. And they have had trouble in over the years, sort of like I say, getting the job done in the final stretch. Even last season, Steve, obviously they battled for the title with Mjällby. Times in the season it looked like they could win the league, and they just fell short, unfortunately. When you look at what they've done in the transfer window, they've brought in Victor Lind, which I think is a really good signing. That's their biggest money signing from Brommapojkarna. I think he's a really good player. He was in my 10 to watch about 2-3 years ago, actually. Then he went off again and came back and had a good season last year at BP. So he might be, still a young player. So maybe he's going to start coming into his prime. And, at a big club like Hammarby, I think he's got a chance to shine now and really sort of show why. I put him in that 10 to watch at the time and saw a lot of quality in him, the Danish winger. They've also got, their academy that always brings through players. And if there's one good thing about Hammarby, it's always that they'd have new players that come in. I mean, most of their players that they've brought into their squad this season are between 18 and 20, very young players. And a lot of them are sort of African players and players that have played in their TFF team, which is like their third division, sort of like you could call it a feeder team, essentially. A couple of Gambian forwards that have come into the squad and things like that. So I think the squad looks exciting. The problem that they have maybe is in some areas how they're going to adapt to some of the moves. I mean, Adrian Lardo, that you mentioned it at the top of the show. I mean, 12 million, I think is, they've had Como's pants down there, in my opinion. I think he's got ability, but Como maybe have seen something because I know they have good scouts and I know they do a lot of work on it. But I think it's maybe they're investing in potential rather than sort of like proven ability. So it's hard to comment on that, but I think that's a hugely inflated fee potentially. They've lost a couple of players, like Simo Strand and Pavle Vagic, but all in all, I think that they are still kept a lot of the good players. If you look at someone like Nahir Basara, my big question with Hammarby Steve this season is Basara going to be a player now where he's just getting on a little? He's now 35, and I'm just wondering, he's probably the Bruno Fernandes of the league in terms of like the clear, arguably best player in pound for pound in the league, especially for that one team, if that makes sense. Like Bruno's just so much of a totem figure for Manchester United, and one of the best players in the league. And I think Basara is similar. He's like the totem figure of Hammarby, the creative genius. And at 35, you just start to wonder. I mean, will the legs catch up with him this season, or maybe that midsummer break will help him and just have a rest? I think that is the big question for me about, can he carry them like he's carried them in the past? I mean, I think last season he got 18 goals roughly, which is just ridiculous numbers for someone that age. So there's a lot to like about Hammarby, but I think there are some challenges as well with the new manager, maybe with Basara being a year older. And so I've got them a second.
Yeah, they did have the best home record last season in the Allsvenskan, 12 wins out of 15. I mean, they score a lot of goals. They pretty much were top of every metric table last year, apart from points obtained and the defense. So obviously, it almost feels like perhaps now or never for them to win trophies again, because they're in that cup final. They're the favourites to win the league at the moment with the bookmakers. So yeah, there's quite a big target on their back. The new manager, Kalle Karlsson, of course, has done well with Västerås in the last few years. But yeah, I mean, Kim Hellberg did exceptional, didn't he, here at Hammarby? He got the Middlesbrough job. If Hellberg was still in charge, would you predict Hammarby to win the league?
That's an interesting question. I think that I leaned to immediately say yes. But I think that could be maybe a little bit of a disservice to Kalle Karlsson. So I don't want it to look as if I'm saying they're not going to win it because of the new manager. But I'd probably have said yes, simply just because
for continuity.
Yeah, just because of the continuity and having, he's such a well-liked manager there. I think it's a big challenge for a manager in his first season at a big club to win the league straight away when they haven't won the league for ages, to get over the line. I think that's a big challenge. So I think in your first season as a manager at a big club like that, I think finishing second would be a magnificent achievement, to be honest. And that's why I just think that with Karl-Maris Axon, with the continuity he has at Mjällby, even though it is his first season, technically, he's already been in and around the building. I think that is a key differential between the two clubs. Having said that, Hammarby have got some fantastic players. Paulus Abraham, Montella Majed, Besara. That team is quite stacked, to be fair. But then again, like I say, they did lose some defenders back in the mid-season and things like that. So they have had a bit of upheaval in the squad. The spine is strong. The goalkeeper's good. But yeah, I just think that it's a big ask for a manager to come into a first job at that kind of level of club and immediately win the league. The key point being, Steve, win the league at a team that hasn't won the league historically. I think it's about 20 years since they won the league, roughly, and maybe more.
2001, it's 25 years.
Exactly. So I think it's a huge challenge to come in and win the league that quickly.
It's so hard for these Stockholm teams as well because there's so many rivalries there. I think they always drop points against each other a lot of the time. Just want to move on now to your team that you are predicted in third. And this is an interesting one. I know you were debating about this position before we went live on air. A little bit worried you might be too high on them, but you stuck with this team in third.
Yeah, and it's probably my most left field prediction, maybe the one that maybe I might get some pelters for or could maybe fall flat on my face. But when I thought about it, the rationale is simple, Steve. I'm basing a lot of my predictions this season on managers, and I just think that they have one of the best managers in the league, and for as long as he's there, I will be riding on them, and that is GAIS. They finished third last season, and I'm going 1-2-3 again. 1-2-3, Mjällby, Hammarby, GAIS, which will surprise some, maybe, particularly when you look at the size of the club. They've only been recently really promoted. They're quite new to the league from that point of view. They are a historically massive team. They've lost some big players as well. So from that point of view, you might look at it and say, well, why are you predicting a team that's lost some of its key men to finish in the top three again? But I just think that, as I've said, I'm a massive fan of their manager. I think he will be the next Kim Hellberg, in my opinion. I think he'll be I'm not sure if he'll necessarily end up in the championship, but I could 100% see him being someone who, come this time in 4 or 5 months when an English team needs a manager, like a Swansea or someone like that, who's always looking at Scandinavia, it seems. I just think he'll be one of those names. Kalle Carlson obviously was that kind of manager at one point. They had a lot of links to America and Scotland. Obviously now he's at Hammarby, so I don't think he'll be on the market potentially. But I think GAIS as manager, there's a very high chance that I think he will be. So yeah, Fredrik Holmberg, he is a 46-year-old manager. He's got a fantastic win record at GAIS. I think he's won 56% of his games. I think he's won 82 out of 146 matches, which is incredible for a team that has, before that, GAIS had to drop down to the third division. They were a nothing club for many years, even though they were one of Gothenburg's biggest teams. And so he's really brought them back to life. This is like reviving, it's a bit like kind of in England, in England, it would be equivalent of sort of bringing back a team like Sheffield Wednesday maybe to life, a former big club in the top division who's fallen down the leagues, or someone like that. Maybe Leeds at the time when Leeds were, in the doldrums. That's the sort of level of output of GAIS historically in Swedish football. And he's been the man who's done that. So that just tells you how good a manager is, in my opinion. When you look at the squad, they have lost 2 key men in Amin Boudry, who got a big move to MLS at LAFC. And I did really rate him. I think he's a very, very good player. And they've also lost Ibrahim Diabate, who a lot of people spoke about last year, big target man. However, I think they have been able to replace them reasonably well enough. We'll see how these players will get on. I think Samuel Salter has come in from Canada, a bit of a unknown, I think, quantity. I don't know much about him, if I'm being honest, but he seems to have started quite a few games, and maybe he's going to be the one to replace Diabate. They've got a left winger that has spent a bit of money on called Blessing Asumang from Örebro, so maybe he could come in and do a bit. But I just think that it's not necessarily going to be one key man that does it. I think they've kept some of their better defenders, and when you look at the squad as well, they've still got some of their better midfielders, in my opinion. The likes of, Jonas Lindberg and others. So I think they can have an okay season, and I think they can challenge for the top 3. I think they're very good at home. They've got passionate fans. The challenge will be maybe away from home. Can they sort of still impress? But yeah, as I say, Steve, I think when you've got a manager of that quality, it counts for a lot in this league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you here about the manager, definitely. I mean, I think we're probably both surprised he's still at the club. I mean, I look through the squad, and apart from one player who is clearly top quality, national team level in Lundgren, I mean, the rest of the squad doesn't look that amazing to me. It's probably a mid-table squad, really, isn't it? Maybe I'm doing a bit of a disrespect there, but the manager just gets everything and more out of this set of players, and there's other factors you've got to consider with GAIS, haven't you? Like you say, the fans there, the history, and everyone. The system seems to work really, really well, and we've seen it so many times in football, in loads of leagues across the world. It's not always about what's on paper, is it? But Lundgren is obviously going to be a key man for them, isn't he? Gustav Lundgren wormed his way into the national team setup. I think he was with them throughout this journey from the lower divisions as well.
Yeah, good player, Steve. That's who I meant. Apologies. So yeah, I think they've got some good midfielders in there, and I think the other thing to bear in mind with GAIS is that they've just got very passionate fans. I think just at home they're a challenge. They're not an easy team to play against. I remember being at a game once, Steve, and someone chucking some beer over the top of the stand. They're not the kind of team you want to get upset. So yeah, I think they've just got a lot about them that they just feel like they're a team on the up at the moment in general. Things are going their way. They're kind of riding the crest of a wave, in my opinion, at this moment in time, and I just expect that wave to continue maybe for one more year. Holmberg will get a lot of interest, as I've said. I remember talking to some people in Gothenburg about him, and I spoke to one of the GAIS players this time last season, and he said that he's a great man manager, someone who's really just gets on well with the players, kind of manager you want to work for and be part of a squad. So I think he will get the maximum out of a lot of the players, and that's the key for me. So yeah, it's not only the manager, but I think it's just the all-round feel of the club.
Yeah,
got a decent academy, and like I say, the fans are. It's not an easy place to go when those fans are up for it and when they're in the mood. So that's why I've got them in third.
Right, in fourth place, and this is probably the team preview I'm most interested to hear about from you, Jonathan. Of course, this team were linked with GAIS' manager of the winter, I do believe, at certain points. And for the first time since 2014, Malmö are not the bookmakers' favourites to win the league. In fact, they're only the third favourites to win Allsvenskan. They're usually right at the top of the betting slips. You've got Malmö predicted in fourth place, which, in recent years would be completely unthinkable. But here I was thinking you might even potentially predict them lower. Malmö are such an interesting club to talk about, Jonathan. We could probably need a whole hour on them by themselves, but we're going to have to condense it into 10 minutes max. So tell me about Malmö FF and their sort of decline.
Yeah, I won't even take 10 minutes. I think I'll give it in a 4-5. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the league table last season, you've not left the suspense there, Steve. You've gone straight in and with the prediction.
I wanted to go straight in on this one.
But yeah, I've got Malmö fourth. Last season they finished sixth. So actually, from Malmö fans' point of view, maybe they could be quite happy with that. Maybe I'm not being so harsh on them, but it does feel very strange to be predicting Malmö in fourth place, especially behind teams like Mjällby and GAIS. That would have been unthinkable. Well, it would have literally been impossible 2 years ago when GAIS weren't in the league, and it would have been unthinkable to be below Mjällby in any previous season. But that's what's happened, and I think it's a season of transition for Malmö. I think it's going to be a year that they're just going to have to try and re-establish themselves. Been a lot of changes at the top level as well, boardroom level and at squad level, and I just think that's all going to pay. A lot of people sort of think they could finish lower as well. So I know the media have predicted them sort of third. I've strongly considered and thought a long time about putting them lower than even fourth, to be honest. But the reason I didn't is I just thought Malmö is Malmö at the end of the day, and anything lower than fourth, I just did it. It's still Malmö at the end of the day. Malmö FF, the giant club, and I just feel like with no European football, playing at home every week, every other week, their home record should be enough to at least get them in that top four. But maybe it could go a different way. And they've still got a lot of quality in their squad, but there's two factors really that have got me wondering about Malmö this season, to be honest. And I'd say the first one is the manager. I'm not entirely convinced about his track record, and I'm not sure where this appointment's really come from. I'm very interested to see how it goes. I'm not writing off by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not too sure about this new manager, Miguel Angel Ramirez, who's come in from Spain. Obviously, Spanish managers have a very high stock. They're very highly rated. He's 41. He's a young manager, done fairly well in the Swedish Cup until he got battered by Mjällby in that game. But he's formerly of Real Zaragoza, Steve. When I look at his career, he's done okay. He's won, I think, one honour in his career, Copa Sudamericana. So that's obviously quite an important trophy when he was at Independiente. Or was it Internacional? He's won. He's been at Charlotte. He's been at Sporting Gijón. He's been around. He's managed in I think in the Emirates as well, at Al Wakra. But yeah, most recent job was Zaragoza, and he was at the Aspire Academy in Qatar as a youth coach. One thing I know about him is Steve. He's only really his biggest tenure was at Independiente, 69 games, and Sporting Gijón, 66 games. But at Zaragoza, he was there for 10 games, and Al Wakra, he was there for 7 games. So he's not really been at a club long term since sort of 2023, really. So I think it's a huge challenge to come into a team in transition like Malmö, a club that's in complete transition. There's a bit of an old guard at Malmö that I just think is maybe coming to the end of their sort of careers. Players like obviously Robin Olsen and obviously the captain Pontus Jansson, players like that. They have had some interesting signings, but I think they've also lost some players, Steve. So the squad kind of makes me look at it and think all round, I think maybe top 4, maybe challenge for top 3 is where they're going to be this season.
Just had to Google where Gijón is in Spain. I forgot where it was. It's on the north coast. Never been myself. Maybe you have, Jonathan. But I mean, this manager, you say he's been around the block. He's only 41, which I mean, I think that's a bit worrying. And his track record, he doesn't seem to last long anywhere. I am honestly getting vibes here from Malmö similar to Rosenborg in Norway. Is it the end of an era for a dominant club? This could be the end of an era if they don't sort themselves out this season. I think it's a massive year for them. I could see a situation where the manager ends up leaving, they get someone else in, and they. One thing I will say for Malmö, they'll have plenty of clout for, say, a summer spending spree, and that could save their asses. But if they get it wrong, you could end up where Rosenborg are right now and kind of in no man's land, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, I mean, 4th place for Malmö. Prediction seems, I think, entirely fair from you, actually, Jonathan. So, there's plenty of concerns, but still a bit of quality in there. The home, you mentioned the home fans can really help them out, but could they be a hindrance as well? Because the fans have not been too happy, have they, recently about what's been going on at the club? It could be a poisonous atmosphere, potentially.
Well, yeah, I mentioned that the home fans for GAIS is going to be, a big strong point, and I think it could be a hindrance for Malmö this season. I think you hit the nail on the head there, really comparing them to Rosenborg. I think it is a very big parallel, but I don't expect Malmö to go into a sort of Rosenborg style tailspin. I just think it might be 1 year, and then maybe they'll sort things out. They're too big a club, in my opinion, with too big a revenues, and I just can't see them going on some slide. And also, Steve, I don't think there's a Budo Glimt in Sweden, if you get what I mean. Unless Mjällby really buck up, unless Mjällby really show us what they've got, I don't think there's kind of like a Glimt that's going to dominate Sweden and sort of put Malmö into the shadows for the next sort of 5 years. So I do expect this to be maybe a 1-season switch. I think that when you look at the transfers and look at the squad, the problem they've got, Steve, and this is the problem that I mentioned at the top of the show about Sweden, they've lost key players, and they've lost players that I think they really could not afford to lose, in my opinion. Obviously, Hugo Bolin has left, and I think that's quite a big blow. But I think the one that if there was one position, Steve, and I know you're a man who loves this position, if there was one player that I would have built my entire Malmö team around for 2026, it would have been Melker Elborg. And lo and behold, Sunderland have come in and just snapped him up for, in my opinion, a pittance at sort of £3 million. He's now already starting in the Premier League, And that just about sums it up. It started in the Europa League, Steve, some of his games where I thought this kid is going places. And when you looked at Robin Olsen, Steve, who's someone I can't understand why he was starting games at the back end of last season. I know he's come back from Aston Villa. I know he's a bit of a legend in Sweden in that sense, but he's 36 years old. And from my opinion, I was thinking the new Malmo needs to revolve around Malcolm Elborg. Bolin, obviously, you can expect to leave. He's 22, and he's been around the block, so that wasn't a massive surprise. But I think Elborg leaving so early when he was just establishing himself in his career, he was still sort of rotating as a goalkeeper. So Sunderland have definitely done some great scouting there and picked him up. And I just think that's a massive blow in terms of like Malmo's trajectory, because I think those are the sort of players you want to build your next big team around. And that is a sign of maybe where Sweden's at, and that's obviously impacted, one of the biggest clubs. When you look at the players they've brought in, the big sort of signing they splashed out on is Jovan Milosavljevic, an 18-year-old central midfielder from Zeles Pančevo in Serbia. That's a big money signing, and let's see how it goes. They've also bought Oskar Jostrand from Cambuur for €2 million, a left winger. So those will be the two that people would expect to do big things. Yanis Karabielov as well from Partizan is come in, a bit more experienced, and looks like he's going to be sort of quite heavily involved. I like Billion Kurtulus, who is the Kurtulus who used to be at Hammarby's brother, Edvin Kurtulus, I think it is, and he I think will get some games. He's an 18-year-old, and I think he's got a really big future. Probably one, if we were doing a 10 to watch, I'd probably be having him in there somewhere. They've still got the likes of Rossler and others. So I think there are some interesting players there. But all in all, I just think, like I say, I think it's a bit of a season of transition. And my biggest question mark for Malmo is the manager. I'm just not sure what we're going to get from him. Maybe he's the next Henrik Rydström, and he stuns the league, and they're absolutely incredible. But I think if you look at the top three managers in this league, the ones I've mentioned just before in terms of Carlson, is he a top three manager? I'm not sure. He's got a bit to prove, but obviously he's got a good track record. When you look at Axum and you look at Holmberg, I'd put those above this new manager for now until I see more evidence.
Robin Olsen is the joint most expensive goalkeeper in Allsvenskan fantasy, 6 million, but he's only owned by 1.7% of people, and that doesn't surprise me, Jonathan. I can't believe he's that price. He would be the last goalkeeper that I would select in fantasy. What is the lowest you could see Malmo going this season?
Yeah, we'll drop the fantasy code in a minute, Steve. You tell me when you want to do that. My final thing, in terms of the lowest, I think if things go badly for them, I could see them finishing like sixth again. I could see it going quite badly wrong for them. There are teams that could potentially challenge them, like the next team on my list, for that fourth place, even let alone sort of top three. So if things go wrong, I could see them maybe at best finishing sixth. I don't think they're going to be below sixth. Just can't see it, especially with no European football. And I think that was a big hindrance for them. So I think that is a thing that people aren't maybe factoring in, that they're going to be able to focus on this league now. When Malmo are focused, for all the criticism, if there's one thing that you have to be worried about, it is a wounded animal like Malmo with no European football. So, don't get me wrong, they could easily challenge for this title. We could easily be sitting here in 3 months saying they're top of the league. I don't expect it, but I don't think they're going to sort of like I say, turn into a Rosenborg. Lowest I would expect them to finish would be fifth, to be honest.
You got them predicted fourth in the table, and I did manage to get you to talk about them for 10 minutes, which is kind of what I wanted. But anyway, into fifth place now, and now half the league this season, incredibly, is either from Gothenburg or from Stockholm. Half the league, 8 of the 16 teams are from those cities. And you've got one of those teams in fifth place here, Jonathan. Which one?
Yeah, I've gone for Djurgården. I think they'll be fifth. I really, like I say, I thought long and hard about maybe having them fourth and even third at one point. So Djurgården have sort of just been, they've just lost out on the fact that I think if you did them back to back with Malmo, I just think Malmo will win more home games. I know Djurgården are quite strong at home in general, big Stockholm giant, but pound for pound, I just think Malmo, I think they just could pick them to that fourth place. So media have predicted them fifth. They finished fifth last season, and I've got them fifth.
Yeah, fifth place for Djurgården. I mean, they had an interesting season last year, didn't they? They got to the Conference League semi-finals, of course, paid for it with their league form at the time. Then I think they finished the second half of last season as possibly the second best team in the league on the field. But it's ultimately kind of got them nowhere, really, to a degree. And, in terms of the departures, you mentioned at the top of the show, they've lost the likes of Prisquet. There have been some significant ins and outs at the club, and that could be a disruption factor for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a case of they're a big club. I think it comes back to the manager. I'm not 100% sure. I think he's a decent manager, but I think he's got a little bit to prove in my eyes. I think there were ups and downs in his tenure so far. I think there's been times where he's looked good. Some of the European games, for example, when he came into the job at that point and helped them sort of qualify for the semi-finals, as we said, in that historic season. Then last season there were some games where you thought, wow, they're clicking. They could really be a big deal. And then it kind of tailed off, and they ended up, like I say, not really having the sort of best of seasons from their fans' point of view. I think they might have expected to be a little bit higher, and it did kind of peter out a little bit in the end, to be honest. So they finished in 5th place. They sort of lost 7 games out of 30, which is quite a lot, I think, in my opinion. And didn't really score a huge amount of goals. I mean, they did okay in terms of scored 52 goals, actually, so it's not bad, but also conceded 32. So I just felt like the balance went against them in a lot of games. And then my key thing for Jurgen, Steve, when I was looking at the table and thinking where would they finish, I just think the transfers and the players they've lost they've lost a lot of quality, in my opinion. Priska, he started to look like one of the best strikers in the league, and I think he justifiably got a big move. A bit early maybe, but he really showed a lot of talent. He wasn't there long, to be honest, but he really was a bit of a stud of a player towards the end of it. The other key player I think that they've lost I think they will suffer without him a little bit is Keita Kosugi. I thought he was a fantastic young defender at Eintracht Frankfurt. He's left now, and it's for a big money signing. So he's gone for 6.5 million euros, Priska 7 million euros to Birmingham. The other one, sort of the biggest other sort of transfer out, is Theo Bergvall. Obviously one of the Bergvalls who's got to move to Switzerland. He wasn't that prominent. And I think the biggest news, Steve, really is the potential departure of Boss Anderson, their sporting director, who's been at the club for many, many a year. So there's a lot of turbulence off the pitch with Jurgen, a lot of changes behind the scenes. And that is why I think that they, we'll look at the transfers in a minute maybe, but that's why I think they'll finish 5th.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a fair assessment. I think they could be the sort of team that maybe gets better as the season progresses. Really, I mean, Jurgen, in terms of the transfers in, then we might as well talk about them. A couple of players that would catch your eye then.
Yeah, well, the one I quite like is Leon Heen. I think he's got a bit of potential at Degerfors. I thought he's the brother of Isaac Heen, who ended up getting a move to Italy, and he played at UDIF as well. Max Larson, I think, is a decent left back at Västerås. So they've raided a couple of the lower teams, and I think that's always quite a good strategy, to be honest. The one I'm quite interested to talk about, Steve, I'd like to get your opinion on, is Christian Lean. A lot of people quite like him. He's been at Groningen. He's a Norwegian forward, and he's the one that's going to come in and expected to replace Priska. Now, he scored a couple of goals in the Swedish Cup, 2 goals in 4 games, and he's ex-HamKam as well, Steve. So he's also been at Mjøndalen Start, so he's been around the block in Norway. I don't know if you know much about him yourself.
Yeah, he scored, I think, double-digit goals for HamKam last season on loan. Former Mjøndalen, got his move to the Netherlands. Didn't exactly fail there, but it didn't really work out either, if you know what I mean. Just probably the level was too much for him. Do you know, I don't mind him. I mean, he's a big lad, puts himself about. He's got a bit of technical about him. He should get goals, really, in a team that's predicted to finish in the top 6. So, yeah, I think it's quite a positive signing, really, overall. Yeah, their signings don't look too bad, actually, if they work out, do they? Jurgen, interesting team. Quite like their style. I like watching them. So, yeah, you've got them in 5th place, Jonathan, for this season. It should work pretty well for them, hopefully. But we're going to have a look at some other teams now. And I'm interested here in 6th place. This is a team that everyone seems to be predicting quite high. Now, to get in the top 6, you've normally got to be knocking on the 50-point door. So for this team to manage that, they're going to have to improve by 10 points. So I'm really intrigued, Jonathan, here as to why this particular side is going to improve so much, in your opinion?
Yeah, now I've gone for Sirius in 6th. And again, it's a bit of a left field one. I might end up with some egg on my face. I think, just looking at it now, even I'm probably being a bit optimistic when you consider the teams have got 7th and 8th. So I think this could, I put them between 6th and 8th. But listen, I'm going to be optimistic this season. They finished 9th last year. The media has got them in 6th, so I'm a little bit aligned with the media on this one. And I think Sirius are going to have maybe a bit of an upward swing. Now, let's look at positives and negatives. Reasons to be positive in terms of why I think they could do that. I think, well, let me start with maybe question marks. I think the question mark might be the head coach. I'm still not 100% convinced about in terms of, is he the man to get them, into the top 6? I think he's an interesting manager to me. He's quite opinionated. I've met him a couple of times. Obviously, he used to be the assistant manager of the good friend of the pod, Sean Constable, over at Brommapojkarna many years ago, Andreas Engelmark. Now, he had an okay season in his first year there last season. There were times where you thought they should do a little bit better, and then there were times where, he left big players out and you thought they should be playing, and there were times that you thought they should be, maybe they were overachieving a little bit, and then they would underachieve. So it was a real mishmash, I think, last season for them. They were, they frustrated a bit. When they were good, and when they were bad, they were awful type thing. But I think Engelmark, maybe with an extra season under his belt now as a head coach, first team manager, I think, I'm not saying it's a negative, but I think he's got a little bit to prove, really. Is he a top 6 manager? I'm not 100% convinced as yet. There's a little bit to prove. But I think when we go through the team, Steve, and if you look at how they got on in the Swedish Cup as well, they had some pretty good wins and they've looked good in pre-season. They battered Sundsvall 6-0. They beat Helsingborg 4-1. They beat Elfsborg away 2-1. They beat IFK Göteborg and then went out on penalties against Hammarby. So there's a lot of positivity. A lot of people are predicting that they're going to have a decent season, maybe a little bit based on how they've looked at it in pre-season, Steve. And the other reason that that's maybe the question mark. I wouldn't say it's a negative, but that's the question mark. Is the manager capable of maybe making them more consistent and getting that extra 10 points, as you've put it? But the reason to be positive, Steve, is I just think that they've kept some of the key men. I know Leo Walter got his big move finally. A player I thought would leave a year ago, more or less.
Incredible how long he stayed there.
Him out of my fantasy team, and eventually he never left. But he's eventually gone to Swansea. However, for quite a decent fee, by the way. However, they have. I think for Walter, I think it's a loan with a buy move, but I think it ended up being about several millions anyway. But Steve, I just think they've got quite a good team. I think when you look at the forwards as well, it's an exciting side. I think they've got Björkebo, Robbie Ure, and a player that I'm quite excited to look at this season called Neo Jonsson. Steve, he's 19 years old. He's a right winger, and he has come out and said that he thinks he wants to win the Ballon d'Or one day. And I absolutely love it when players say things like that publicly. He's talked about the video things he does with his dad, who used to be a Hammarby player. He watches a lot of video. He spends an extra time in the gym. He hired a running coach, I think, to help him improve his sprinting. Björkebo has been in really good form in pre-season, and a lot of people think Robbie Ure is going to be the next big money signing, maybe to the Championship. A Scottish man, in fact. So I've seen even some tips on Twitter, people saying, why isn't he maybe he's the answer to Scotland's sort of forward problems. Why isn't he getting a chance? Well, I think this might be the year that he starts to get maybe a bit of a look in potentially, because I do expect him to score quite a lot of goals. He had a good season last year, scored a good number of goals, and he could potentially maybe improve on that. I think the only other challenge there, maybe, Steve, is that I think they could maybe potentially lose him in the summer. But if they're able to keep him for the full season, the midfield is quite sort of technically gifted. The recruitment of Sirius is quite good, and I think one player to watch potentially is Mohamed Souma, a centre-back at Ghent that they've brought in for €1 million. So all things considered, Steve, I think this is a team that are going to be quite exciting to watch.
Well, they were the most exciting team to watch last season. They had the most over 2.5 goal games of any side, 21 out of 30 games over 2.5 goals. and only Varnamo had more matches over 3.5 goals. And they were one of just 2 teams not to have a 0-0 draw. Can you name the other team that didn't have a 0-0 draw in Allsvenskan last season? That is a good quiz question for those who are listening. It's an answer which you might not get, actually. But Sirius, it was Mjällby, who didn't have a 0-0 draw last season. So that surprised me with their defence that they had. But yeah, Sirius, that definitely didn't surprise me. And in fact, 27 of their 30 games had at least 2 goals in them. Robbie Yor, I mean, he's the most owned player in fantasy, even more than Basara. 60% of people own him. 8.5 million he is in the game. I mean, it seems like he's an absolutely essential buy for anyone. He does kind of scream of the sort of player, though, who may well move in the summer, like you said, perhaps.
Say that again, sorry.
With the striker, Robbie Ure, I think he's one of the favourites to win the Golden Boot this year in Allsvenskan. He's very highly owned in fantasy. Do you think he could go almost too well for them and they end up losing him?
Yeah, I said that just before. Yeah. I think he will be a strong candidate to get a move in the summer. It doesn't surprise me that he's got a high fantasy sort of selection. I think he's a very good player. He's got all the attributes. He reminds me a little bit of Sirius has been pretty good with forwards over the years, and he does remind me a little bit of Celeste, who ended up going to Cardiff, I think it was. He's got those kind of attributes, and I think that having kept him, I thought he would be someone who maybe a Malmö would have taken a punt on, or a Djurgården maybe potentially, and just really splash the cash and just get him in your team. And that's why I question some of the recruitment, maybe sort of some of those teams that I've got maybe a little bit lower this summer. Normally they sort of go all out for some of the top players in Allsvenskan, and I haven't really seen too much evidence of that this year. So I'm surprised it's still there, and I think that's to Sirius advantage. And that's why I've ended up with them in 6th. And I think, like I say, the spine's strong, the midfield is technically gifted, the wide men are creative. If they get a couple of injuries, that will be my worry, but I think they'll be between 6th and 8th, and I've just gone positive. Why not? And let's put them in 6th.
Maybe a team that could have taken a punt on you is the side you're going to talk about next. This is a team that finished with the lowest number of goals in the top 10 last season. They're the only team that officially sacked their manager over the winter break. So who have you got in 7th place?
Yeah, well, it's one of the Stockholm Giants, and in some ways, I think maybe I've been a bit harsh, and maybe I could have had them in that 6th place, potentially. But they haven't really, had the greatest of times over the years, have they, in the last couple of years? Last season, they did finish 7th, so I'm quite uniform in my predictions this year. And the media, again, have got them 7th. So I'm going for Oikor, Steve. I think they're going to finish in the top 7. Top half finish, I think it will be, again, a bit similar to Malmö in the sense that I think they're a giant of the league, of course, but I think they've just fallen on hard times a little bit. And I think they're sort of still refining their identity. A lot of upheaval over the winter break and changes, at different levels, on the footballing side, off the pitch as well, and also, on and off in terms of the coaching staff and playing staff. So I think that is why I've ended up I just think there's a lot of upheaval, and that is why I've gone for them in 7th place.
They've got a new manager. It's another Spanish manager here. Previously was in charge of Al Ahly and actually managed him at the Club World Cup, but only lasted 7 games before he was sacked. Jose Rivero. I mean, another manager who's been around the block quite a lot. Do you know much about him? What are we expecting from AIK? Historically, quite a defensive team. Is he going to keep that up? I can't imagine a Spanish coach will be focusing on defence.
Well, yeah, he's slightly older than the Malmö coach. He's 48, so he's had a bit more life experience, you could say. He's been around the block a bit more. Like you say, he's a manager who's had different experiences in life, but he has at least reached the 100-game mark in his career. Unlike the Malmö manager, he managed 102 games at FC Inter, which is a team Inter Turku, so that's not the Inter Milan. That's a different Inter. And also 131 games for Orlando Pirates, Steve. So he's moved from sort of Egypt to South Africa, moved from Finland to Egypt to South Africa. So very very mixed bag of experiences in his career, but he has had success. He won the Finnish league. He's won cups as well. So he has got some pedigree. I think he's a manager who tends to favour a 4-2-3-1 formation, and potentially he's got, I think, some ability. You look at the circumstances of the way the last manager left, though, and it is a bit of a concern because I think he was quite a decent manager, but it ended up being a bit of a mutual kind of like, it's not me, it's you type feeling when the previous manager left, and it was just a bit of a unpleasant ending. Really, didn't feel like a good end. I don't know what really happened behind the scenes, but there was a lot of different accusations about different people and things like that. So the only thing I'd say about Oikor is that they have got quite a good squad. They have lost some players, but they still have quite a packed squad actually, and I think that's the one thing that can benefit them. The goalkeepers are still quite experienced. Nordfeldt, Kalle Olsen. At the back, they've still got the likes of Papagiannopoulos, who's still there. Steve Mads-Chosen. A couple of others have left though, so that's going to be interesting to see how they get on from that point of view. That they've had quite a sort of solid back line over the years, but players like Isherwood have left now, and others. Guidetti's gone, so some of the maybe older names. I think a key man that's left is Anton Seletros. I really think that's a massive loss. I know he's 29 now, but he was a huge return in my opinion. Benkovic has also left a centre back. He's gone to China. So from that point of view, they have lost a couple, but some of the players they've brought in as well, I think, could be potentially quite interesting to look at and watch. We've mentioned, we mentioned off air, I think Amel Mujanic is someone who Örgryte will be really disappointed to lose. He's come on a free transfer, and that kind of does affect, I think, their chances maybe Örgryte, but we'll get to them later. They brought in a lad called Lucas Bergqvist as well, Ibrahim Cisse from Kups. So a lot of the players they brought in maybe got something to prove, maybe, big question marks about them. But I just think the squad is still okay. They've still got like Song Vai, who I think is a good player. They've got Dino Basirovic. They've got sort of Ali. They've got Johan Hove, who I think is a good player. Bersant Selina, another one. So they have got talent. Taha Ayari. So they have got talent, Steve. I wonder sometimes where the goals might come from. There's going to be a lot of emphasis placed on Eric Flatacre to get goals, I think, and not sure if he's still only young, but I think there'll be a bit of pressure on him. Kevin Filling, who I did mention in a recent Huddle Y Scout blog, Steve. So the squad is sort of, I don't think it's like a team like Hammarby where they're settled and they're proven and they've got some quality players in there. It's more a case of like they've got a lot of decent players, but who's going to be the main man? And I think that's what they're going to be searching for, especially in light of Seletros' departure.
Yeah, I worry about the lack of goals when I look at this team as well. Positive for me has got to be in goal. Christopher Norfeldt recently started, of course, the playoff game for Sweden, which they won against, who did they beat? Poland, that was it. He's the third most owned goalkeeper in fantasy, 22.7%, 5.5 million player. And do join the fantasy league. The code to join is 6G1H49. 6G1H49 to join the Nordic Football Podcast Fantasy League. Right, we'll finish off the top 8 then, the top half of the table.
Wait. Before we finish, Steve, I can't let you get away with this one.
What's that?
Yeah, for those who want to join the Fantasy League, do that. But I need to just say, if there's one thing that I didn't mention about Oikor, I would just say keep an eye out for a young talent called Zadok Johanna. An 18-year-old Steve who is on the lips of a lot of players. One thing I didn't say about Oikor, Steve, just then is they are in a bit of financial difficulty, and apparently already there are scouts looking at this young talent. He's been on the radar of a couple of European clubs. He's someone who done okay in the Swedish Cup, and this is what I'm worried about, Steve. Is I think that Oikor might actually have to sell during the season. So I think that is why I've got them in 7th. I can imagine them being a team that one player does quite well and suddenly they're going to be gone. And if it could be anyone, I think it could potentially be this Zadok Johanna. He's come out and said himself that his aim is to win the Golden Boot, which is a big claim. He's a Nigerian winger, Steve. He says he feels good. Everybody at the club has said he's a very laid-back character, a very nice, positive energy. I think Johan Hove said, Steve, that he can sleep 15, 16 hours if he wants to. He's that chilled out. So he's one to keep an eye on. If we did have a 10 to watch, I think he'd certainly be in it. And if there's a shooting light maybe for all equal fans to be excited about, I would say it's him. But just keep it whispered, because I think the worry with their finances is they might have to cash in on a few of them.
I thought you were going to say it's another player who is targeting winning the Ballon d'Or in the future as well. Now, the ambition in Sweden is
he just wants to win the Golden Boot. He set the Golden Boot for now, which is
Golden Boot.
Maybe more realistic.
Yeah, you got Iko in 7th place, and to round off the top half of the table, this is the team actually that you are predicting the biggest drop of all your predictions of all the teams. This is the biggest drop that you are predicting. So I'm a bit concerned here.
Yeah, I think I could end up looking a bit silly here because I might be being a bit harsh, but I've got IFK Göteborg in 8th place, which, yeah, you're right. I could easily see them in 6th, to be honest. Maybe if Malmö have a catastrophic season, like some are predicting, I could even see them maybe top 5 again. So I do feel like this is maybe a little bit harsh, but I'm going for IFK Göteborg, Steve, in 8th place. Media, again, have copied me, or have I copied the media? Who knows? But they've gone 8th. And I think my main rationale behind this is, I think last season they just went on a bit of a run towards the end of the year where things just clicked for them, and they started to sort of rediscover their identity and get a really sort of feel-good factor at the club, which is something new for them, having been in relegation battles in the previous years. And I just think where they go from here is a bit of a, they're a bit of a crossroads. You would have liked to see them really build on that, but I'm not sure if the finances necessarily allow it. So I'm not sure they've massively built on that momentum, which they did build up. I think the fitness coach that they had, I talked about him on the season preview last year. I think that also played into their favour. I think they were just very fit, that team, and they just had a lot of energy in the tank towards the end of the year, which they built on and went on a really fantastic run. I'm just not quite sure they'll be able to keep that going. They've lost a couple of players. I'm not sure if they're massive departures, if I'm being honest. Thomas Santos has gone, who he started really well, but then he tailed off a little bit. And if you look at it, Steve, his market value is $1 million, but he was sold for 134K according to Transfermarkt. So that just shows that he's been sold for pretty much a tenth of his value. He was someone who was such an important player for them at one point, and then became less and less prominent and has gone off to Poland. Potter Starberg's left. He's gone to Lillestrøm. We talked about on the Itinerary pod, and Linus Karlstrand has left as well. He's gone to Osters. So no major departures really. Gustav Svensson's retired. Obviously, he was a key player for them in general and a character. Anders Tronson's gone to HamKam. But all of them are kind of, they're not made a massive sale from those players. But I just think when you look at the players they've brought in, I mean, I do like Alexander Jallow, who's come back from Brescia. But he's 27 now. I think he'll do pretty well. Maybe didn't quite have the career I expected. A solid right back, but he should get some game time. They've kept the likes of Noah Tolf. They've kept the likes of Max Fenger. So I think from that point of view, they can sort of continue the momentum that they had. The big signing in terms of money that they spent is Gabriel Elias Ersoy from Vasalunds, a centre-back, and also Thiago Coimbra from HFX Wanderers in Canada. So those will be two to sort of keep an eye on. But all in all, Steve, I think they maybe really underachieved the year before, but I think they kind of overachieved this season. So I guess my rationale here is that I'm expecting it to sort of revert to the mean a bit this season with a kind of like maybe top 6 to 8 season.
They have the fewest number of draws last season in the Allsvenskan of any team. Won 16 games and lost 11. I've said it before, draws don't get you anywhere. Jonathan, you're better off winning rather than losing. And that's what happened with the IFK Göteborg last season. Is it a bit fair to say that they are really heavily reliant on certain key individuals? Because, if certain players don't perform, I mean, Fenger mentioned him. It was more like Goldfinger last year at one point, wasn't it? Such was his run in front of goal. They are reliant on certain players, I think, and it could be a problem if they don't perform.
Yeah, I think potentially. Weirdly enough, I mean, I kind of agree with you in some ways, but I also kind of disagree in the sense that I think they're very much a collective. I don't think they're a team that's really based on individuals. So there's no one player I look at and go, well, if he's not playing, I really worry. If you looked at sort of like, for example, the Swedish Cup where they lost to Sirius in extra time, that team, they have got some players that you're really excited about. I think Tobias Heinz, had a good year last year and he really came into prominence towards the end of the season. Then he thought Darson at times could be influential. I think the centre back Roxon Yeboah is going to be one to watch. Maybe the 21 years old. He's someone who, when I sort of worked with the club, when I did my masters, was quite highly rated, and I think they've got high hopes for him. Erling Mark, of course, is kind of he's getting on in years now, 27, but he's always been around. Tolf, I did expect to get a move, and I do expect him to get a move probably, if it's not this year, then maybe during the season or next year. And then one that they bought in the mid-season, who came in and had quite a good impact last year as well, who might build on that momentum, is Sadio Alioum. He's someone who was signed from Hammarby, went to Nicosia and came back. Didn't quite work from Hammarby, but he looks like a player who could be potentially quite interesting for IFK Göteborg. But I guess on your point there, Steve, I know Fenger, a lot of people will expect Fenger to get a lot of goals this season, and maybe he ends up like being a Priska who gets a big move somewhere. Not sure if he's sort of maybe championship level, but he has got potential and he's still sort of improving. And he's 24 now, so I don't know if he'll get that massive move, but I could see him maybe moving on at some point. And at least at this level, he's very good for goals. So I think it's more of a collective, if I'm being honest, Steve. But I just don't think that they've got any outstanding talent that you'd say, yeah, on any given Sunday, they're going to smash this game and sort of turn it on their head, turn a tight 0-0 into a 1-0. And I think that's where they're lacking a little bit. I just think they've maybe missing a real X factor that some of the other teams above the table have. You look at Malmö, for example. I don't think they're, we've just talked about them, but they still have players who've got a bit of X factor. They've kept Taha Ali, players like that, who on any given day can just pull out something. Botheim, Djurgården have still got a couple of sort of difference makers. I'm just not sure if IFK have that to the same level, and that's why I've got them 8.
Yeah, I mean, the players I was kind of talking about there, obviously Fenger, Heinz, Tolf, and the goalkeeper. I quite like the keeper, actually, Bishashari. I think he comes up with some really good saves at times. Quirk of the records last year, IFK, and it continually happens now, they just don't have a great home record. 9th best at home, but they were 2nd best away from home record, which I couldn't believe, really. For some reason, they just cannot get that Gamla Ullevi into a fortress. It should be a fortress. They got the best song pre-game of any club in the league, maybe even in the world. It'd be in the top 10. But they cannot make it a fortress, and I don't know why. But anyway,
ironically, GAIS play in the same stadium and have a sort of maybe. I think it's more about expectations. I think IFK fans have a bit more expectations. They're a bit like Spurs in that point of view. They've got a great stadium, but their fans get frustrated if they're not doing well. Whereas GAIS just turn it into a fortress and a party because they're just delighted to be there. But the one point I just want to make on that, you just mentioned it, some of the players there that are key from your point of view. But even if someone like Tobias Heinz, Steve, he's had an up and down career in Allsvenskan. Some years he's been good, some years he's not been so good. He's played at different clubs. So that's my point, really. It's like, what are you going to get from these players? Are they going to have a big season, or are they going to sort of revert back to maybe lesser seasons that they've had in their careers? And that's the challenge for IFK. I just don't see a sort of a real difference maker.
You got them in 8th place to round off your top half of the table. You're predicting IFK in 7th, Sirius in 6th, Djurgården in 5th, Malmö in 4th, GAIS 3rd, Hammarby 2nd, and your predicted champions are Mjällby. Join us in part 2, where we will look at the bottom half of the table, the teams that Jonathan's expecting to be in a bit more trouble. We're going to get his predicted teams to be relegated as well. So stay with us and catch you after the break. Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast, Allsvenskan Season Preview 2026. You are with Steve Wyss and Jonathan Fadugba. We've done the top half of the table predictions from Jonathan. We're now going to do the bottom half. Before that, I want to remind people to join our Fantasy League this season. The code to join is 6G1H49. There's always some great battles that go on in this league, notably between myself and you, Jonathan. So are you confident for Allsvenskan Fantasy this year?
Well, not if Discovery has lost the rights and there's nowhere to watch it. I don't know exactly how that's going to be solved. But yeah, I've been looking at it. I mean, first observations, I think, from a lot of people is the price of Bissara. Do you have him in your team or do you not? 13.5 million, that is quite a lot out of 100 million. What about you, Steve? Are you Bissara in or are you Bissara out?
Well, at the minute I've got him in, but then I suddenly looked at his price and I'm like, wow, this is like Mo Salah, prime Mo Salah in Fantasy Premier League. I'm not at this moment. I'm not as confident as normal. There's certain players that have left the league, which I used to. Leo Walters served me very well down the years, didn't he? Players like that, old favourites that I can't lean on. So yeah, I'm not quite as confident at this point in time. I've got a feeling I might be slower out the blocks than normal, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, certainly a big dilemma for fantasy fans immediately with that price tag of Bissara and how you get around that. But he's such a stud player over the years, isn't he? Such a good player. So it's an interesting one for sure. But yeah, do you want to run that code one more time for those who are joining and how you join?
Yeah, Allsvenskan Fantasy, and it's a much better website than the Norwegian Fantasy, by the way. It's got English section. It's really, I like the graphics on it as well. Really well structured. And I love the chips, of course. That Park the Bus chip is my favourite chip, and they've always used it, and I've always done well with it. And I always use it in a double game week round. So anyway, the code to join, 6G1H49. Do join the NFP Fantasy. Right, we're going to get into the second half of the table. Predictions. In ninth place is a former champion.
It is indeed, Steve. Shall I take it away? Or?
You can reveal who the former champion is.
Yes, in ninth place, if my browser will load, because I'm having some
It's not Kalmar.
technical issues, Steve. But yeah, in ninth place, I have gone for Beko Häcken. Now, two back-to-back Gothenburg clubs, IFK in 8th and Beko Häcken in 9th. Again, Steve, who is it in the Swedish press who's been hacking my Google Doc? Because the media has them in 9th and I have them in 9th. And I don't really like it, unless I've typed this out wrong, because we seem to have got every single position.
Are we using an average media? We sometimes use one person.
I have taken one person because, again, like I say, Discovery, I don't even think they've done season predictions. So something is going on, Steve, and maybe they've lost the rights because they really posted so many great clips, haven't they, over the last 2 seasons? I really hope they aren't, with the move with HBO and all that stuff. I don't know if you even had that, Steve, if you've got TNT Sports and there's all these different apps now and they're all merging into one, and I don't know what's going on. But yeah, they normally Discovery they take all their journalists and do predictions. This year we've gone for the predictions of a website, Steve, called, let me just load the page, give them a bit of a shout out because, they pretty much seem to have, I've copied them or they've copied me, or we're just by luck. 90 Minutes Svenskan is the name of the website. And the predictions are from a particular guy called Spangens. So fair play to him. But yeah, I've got Beko Häcken in 9th, Steve. Some people actually have said they're going to be a dark horse this year. I don't believe those people.
My cat thinks they're going to be a dark horse. She's made an appearance, and we know what that means. Although she made an appearance on Bran on the Norwegian preview, and they've not got a point yet, so it might be a bad sign. Something interesting is going to happen with Häcken.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was listening to that earlier, and when you just said that, I was like, well, she was high on Bran, so let's see where that goes. But yeah, Häcken are a team who really upset me last season, Steve. It made me reflect on. I mean, they gave me an existential crisis last year. It made me think about the passage of time and how life is fleeting.
Oh, no.
Minute, you're enjoying life, and the next minute, everything comes cascading down before your eyes. They really got me in an existential crisis, this club, because I remember the halcyon days, Steve, and it wasn't even that long ago. It was not even 2-3 years ago of Beko Häcken ripping the league to pieces, the most exciting brand of football we've witnessed in Sweden for many a year. And then to see last season, Steve, this turgid, just block of just nothingness at that club, finishing 10th. it really, like I say, it got me in my feels, to be honest. It upset me. I said, "Wherefore art thou, Benny Traore? Wherefore art thou, Ibrahim Sadiq?" Just really flat to deceive, Steve. And this season, I don't really expect them to be that much better, if I'm being honest. I think they'll have a few upturns in fortunes and things like that. They have got some talented players, Steve, and they've been into the market. They signed Norrköping's goalkeeper, who's obviously Norrköping relegated. Goodbye to them. Obviously, we won't be talking about Norrköping this year. Still feels incredible that they got relegated. David Anderson, they've signed him as a big money sort of signing. David Seger, he's come back from Bulgaria. He was formerly he's been around the block. He was at Örebro at one point and others. Philip Halenda as well. He's a former international and he's come from Cyprus. And Gustav Lindgren, Steve, who made a big money move to Peterborough out of all places, and then has come straight back. It didn't really work out for him, and I think he, for all intents and purposes, I think Peterborough fans kind of wrote him off as a bit of a flop. In the outs section, Steve, is where I think they're going to potentially struggle. I mean, firstly, they've lost a couple of key men in the sense of players that have just retired. Jacob Barrett-Larsen, who retired at quite a young age, 31. Don't quite know what happened there for that. Was injury related. Peter Abrahamsson, of course, famous goalkeeper. And Oscar Janssen, again, another passage of time type player, Steve. I remember talking about him when he was in my Y Scout team of the year about 4 or 5 years ago when he was at Norrköping, and he was so highly rated, and he's now 35, which is incredible to think. Other players that they've lost, Steve, Samuel Leach-Holm went to Fredrikstad. He's at Brookberg, got a big move to Poland. And John-Paul Dembe, who I really liked, he's got a move to the Czech Republic, Sigma Olomouc. And I thought he would have had a breakout year if he'd stayed. He's still only 20, 21. So a young player really to be leaving, someone who I thought was quite good. But I suppose the benefit from that point of view, they've still got some good talents. And so whilst I don't expect them to have an amazing season, I think there are players that you should keep an eye on, if that makes sense. I'll just run through a few of them if you like, or I don't know if you have a question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's have some positives about Häcken here.
Yeah, so if they are going to climb up the league and finish in the top half, I think you've got to look at the likes of, there's many places you can look, to be honest, but I think some of the key men, Rigaard is obviously still there, Steve. He's still doing the business, even though in his advanced years. Again, like Basari's 35. Silas Anderson, I think, is someone who a lot of people think has huge potential. Had a decent season last year. He ended up with 5 goals. And I think people do think he will have maybe even more of a breakout year. In the forward areas, they've got a young player called Sanders Ngabo from Denmark who maybe could do okay. Gustav Lindgren, Agbonifo, Adrian Svanbæk is someone that some people like. And then obviously there's the likes of Layuni there still. So they have got some exciting names. Rigaud's one of those players that if he's on his day, he's still a quality player, but it's just obviously he's advancing in years. So there are some reasons to be optimistic. The manager, Jens Gustafsson, is someone who, gets a bit of a bad rep at times. I'm not sure how well he'll do. We'll see. But yeah, all in all, as I say, Steve, I just missed the Beckel Hacker team of 2022-3-4. Just missed that team.
I look at this squad, the starting 11 that is predicted. That don't look too bad to me, I reckon they're the sort of team that could probably beat anyone on the day, but maybe lose to anyone on the day, if you know what I mean. Which there's going to be inconsistencies there. I just hope they bring back some. I mean, they were nothing last year. Home and away record really poor overall, and finishing 10th. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, really. My cat just keeps getting in the way here. Move out the way, otherwise you're going to get my microphone off kilter. But you've got BK Häcken in 9th place for this season. 10th place team. Now, this team for many, many years on the podcast didn't usually get many mentions, certainly mid-season. And you always had them around this sort of spot. But they should have been champions. It still irks me, Jonathan, that this team should have been champions not too long ago. They finished last season terribly. And you're not really putting them down to have a particularly great campaign either this time around.
Yeah, it's Elfsborg. It's a team that, like you said, and who, a bit like, who will ever forget that chance they had? It's still in my mind now, that 2-1 to win the league. can never forget that. I'm sure I'm not even an Elfsborg fan, so their fans must haunt their dreams every night. A team that I think has some decent players, but I think they have had some big departures, and I think over the past year, some of the players they've lost just makes me worried for them in terms of where they're going. I think they are in a bit of a downward spiral. This is a team that was challenging for titles not too long ago, obviously, with your man at Aberdeen, Steve, back in the days. And of course, I think, well, you've got a bit of a penchant for their managers, haven't you? Because obviously their old manager has also left. They've got a new man now. His name's Bjorn Hamberg. He's come in and replaced the previous man. And I'm just not sure. I mean, he's got a bit of a decent track record, Steve. He's been around the block. He's basically Graham Potter's right-hand man. He was his assistant manager at Chelsea. He was assistant manager at Brighton. He was assistant manager at Swansea. He was assistant manager at Östersund. And he was Brighton's under-18 manager in 2025. And he's also Sweden's assistant manager. So very much a lieutenant of Graham Potter. But he has been given the Elfsborg job, and it will be a big challenge for him in his first sort of full-time managerial role, to senior managerial role, I say, to turn this team around. And I think he will need probably a year to sort of adapt, and that's kind of why I've got them in 10th place. I just think it's going to be a bit of an adaptation period year. The other thing I would say, Steve, is I just think they've lost probably their best player, Bestfoot Zanelli, who I think was a really, really good player. He got a move to Union Saint-Gilloise, and I can see why. He was also in the Sweden squad for the World Cup qualifiers, so that just tells you everything in terms of his ability, really. So I think that is a big blow for them. It petered out a little bit last season for them, and yeah, I think there's just been a bit of a sort of a drip effect for Elfsborg over the years. They finished 8th last season, like I say, and various managers. Hiljemark obviously is gone, but they also lost a couple of players behind the scenes, like their key scouts and things like that, who really helped build that squad. So yeah, it's just been a bit of a drip. I think their goalkeeping coach went to West Ham at one point, and just feels like behind the scenes they've just reverted back to maybe a bit of a smaller team club. Remember in the early days of this podcast, Steve, they were a team that we've rarely talked about, if that makes sense. Just kind of a middling team.
Is that going to happen again?
I'm a bit concerned that is maybe where they're heading, maybe for a little bit of a transition period, back maybe in amongst the sort of 8th to 10th to 12th bracket.
That's where they were for many, many years. You mentioned the manager there. He did leave, of course, to Pisa, Oscar Hilmark, Bjorn Helmberg. I mean, to be fair, this Hamburg fella, I reckon, he's got a decent pedigree as an assistant. Let's just see how he does in the top job here. Looks like he's going to be sticking with the 3-4-3 system for now. Any players to be excited about at all with Elfsborg?
Yeah, of course, there's always talents. If it's kind of like players who are going to pull them out of the rut that they're in, maybe it's difficult to say. I think that you could look at someone like Rufai Mohammed at centre back. He was at Varnamo, and I think that he is someone I thought he looked really good for Varnamo, in fact. So potentially he could be a good player for them. He's only 20 years old, and I think he'll probably come in as a centre back. They've still got Isaac Pettersson in goal, who I've always thought over the years he's not a bad keeper. Isherwood's come in from OIK, so he'll bring a bit of experience. Obviously, they've lost Jonas Larsson. Johan Larsson, sorry.
The legend.
Was such a legend, and he was a big storyline last year for him, wasn't it? The sort of like the exit stage left of him, was such a fantastic servant to them. So having someone like Isherwood come in probably will help that back line, just having a bit more experience. They've got a young player called Momo Kamara who's come in, who could be interesting. Arba Zanelli, obviously 31, but he's got some ability to still dictate midfield on his day. I think that Fredrik Ehler and Gottfried Rapp, 2 players. I mean, Rapp I really liked at one point, and I still think Dion Krasniqi on his day has got something about him. So they do have some talents, Steve. Julius Beck, I think, is someone that people will be looking at as well. Maybe he's on loan from Sturm Graz. So they have got players. I think one I would probably point out as the most promising to keep an eye out for potentially is he still there? I don't know. I'll say Beck for now. I'm just looking at the squad list, doesn't match
your list.
But yeah, I'll say Beck for now, but I'm going to come back to you on that.
Yeah, Elfsborg there, you've got them in 10th place, and it feels like perhaps they're in this sort of phase where they could become middling. Last season they had the 7th best home record. Last season they had the 4th worst away record. They lost 9 times out of 15 away from home. Most of those coming in that second half of the season where they just finished so poorly. I don't think the manager departure's the worst thing for them, I think Hilmark was just kind of losing the team a little bit, if you know what I mean. I was a bit surprised that Pisa snapped him up, but effectively he's taken a job on. He knows he's probably going to be in Serie B next season. Let's see how Elfsborg get on. And like you say, you got them in 10th place there. And in 11th, I have never, ever seen you predict this team so high as this before. And I had to double check with you before we went live on air.
Okay, Steve,
sorry to
interrupt you. I've got the player now. So weirdly enough, just sorry about this. Weirdly enough, he is listed on, but I do have to mention him. Weirdly enough, on Transfermarkt, he's listed as an underlying team player, so that's why he's not in the squad, and that's what's confused me here, because I was thinking, where is he? But I want to highlight a Nigerian player called Victor Okeke. He is highly rated, and I know for a fact there was a big battle to sign him. He's now making his way through into the Elfsborg squad. I know IFK Göteborg were very high on him. He's come from a famous academy in Nigeria. He can play in centre midfield. He can also play in different positions. And I think he's someone who could break through the season. He's already played in some cup games. He's from the 44 Academy, a very highly rated academy in Nigeria. So keep an eye on Victor Okeke. I think he could be a breakout talent this year. Don't know how many minutes he'll get, if he'll be involved much, but you asked me if there's anything to be excited about for Elfsborg fans. I think this player is someone to be very excited about. So
Victor
keep an eye on him.
Okeke. Is that Ozor? There's an Ozor Okeke.
Yeah, Ozor, yeah, but he's not
listed as a defender on the fantasy game, but it sounds like he might be a bit more than that. Interesting. I like these sort of players. This is just the sort of player we want to be keeping an eye on with Elfsborg. So yeah, maybe a bit more excitement there than initially planned, and a bit more excitement than normal for the team you're predicting in 11th as well, Jonathan. Dizzy heights these for you.
Absolutely, dizzy heights. So in 11th place, I have got Degerfors.
Wow.
Which, again, might be a bit of a left field prediction. Finished 13th last season, and for much of the year were castigated and condemned to relegation, and somehow, like a phoenix from the flames, emerged and just about survived by the skin of their teeth. But Steve, the media's predicted them 12th, so here we go. Finally, a differential opinion.
The manager's a big part of that, right?
Yeah, I mean that's basically my entire rationale for having them in 11th place. I think they will. I think the bottom 6, Steve. I know you talked about it in your lead series one. The bottom 6, I think, is very hard to predict. To be honest, from here down, it's like paper thin. Each place could be by a few points. I think you could have a situation where the bottom 6 is separated by not a huge amount of points. Whereas I think maybe between 10th and 11th, I could see a bit of a points gap emerging. The team in 12th maybe as well could challenge maybe to be in that top 10. But Degerfors, I've just placed them 11th because I don't think they'll go down. I think a year's experience will just help Henrik Goitom in his role, the former Oikor legend. And I do say that legend, I don't use that word lightly. He is very highly respected in the game of Swedish football. Someone who everybody wants to play for, I think. The kind of manager that you will fight and run through walls for. I think that is the kind of personality he is, and I think he's very astute. And the most important thing is he's very respected, and he was central to them getting out of it at the end of the day. And very, his meticulous attention to detail and his outside the box thinking as well were factors in them escaping. And I just think that this season, if I look at the other 5 teams below them, I feel like Degerfors could have a season where maybe they just get a bit of a run going at some point, and then that helps them have an okay season where they don't struggle too much. I think they'll still have weeks where they get battered. I think there'll still be games where you look at them and, I mean, it's been at least 3 years since I've had a season without a Degerfors rant. And I think there'll be maybe one this year at some point, maybe. But I do expect them to be a bit tighter, a bit more organised this season. I don't think they're going to end up sort of getting back 6-0 and things like we've seen in previous years. So, yeah, I'm just expecting a slightly better year for Degerfors. And I think maybe it's a year where they can sort of maybe have a bit of breathing space.
They looked completely done in mid-season to me last year. They were getting beaten by 2-3 goals most weeks. And then the last 10 fixtures, they picked up 15 points. They were far better. Even the games they lost, it was close. Like Goitom just got something going. I think they were much harder to beat. I mean, based on that points average, they'd get 45 points. I think that's probably asking a bit too much from them, isn't it? But Goitom is someone who you really do have to give him a lot of credit for keeping them up, really. Because they just look totally gone. Who's going to be the key players for them if they are going to get as high as 11th?
At the back, I think Daniel Sundgren, although he's 35, he may have an impact in some games. And I think I think leadership's going to be I think they're not going to be in a great team. It's not like they're going to be battering teams or winning games by big margins. I think it's just going to be a bit of a slow grind. And I think things like experience are going to pay for them as the year goes on. At the back, I don't know how much Sundgren will play really, but it's just his all-round experience. I think you need characters like that in the dressing room. I think those are sort of factors that could do well for them. At the back, Johanni Pikkarainen, a Finnish player, could have some influence. Like I say, Sundgren, Sebastian Olsen, quite like. So from that point of view, they've got a few players there. Netabay is someone who's been around the block for years and years. He's in his 30s now. The one I think you've got to look out for is Marcus Rafferty. I think he's the one that got them basically safe last season. He really was a player that ended up rescuing them at the end of the day. And I think he's someone who will have an influence. You might be thinking that sounds like a very posh English name. And yeah, that's because he is half English. Marcus Rafferty, he was at Hammarby and, they ended up signing him. And I think when he was at Hammarby, I always kept an eye on him and thought he could be someone who maybe breaks through at Hammarby, and he never quite did. But Goitom managed to get the best out of him and really got a tune out of him, and I think he could continue that. Vukiewicz is back. Obviously had that really bad injury, didn't he? But he's always been a bit of a quality player, so keep an eye out for him, of course. I think he will have some impacts. And then they've got a young talent up front called Ole Leonardson, who he's come from their academy and could be one to watch. So, yeah, it's not an amazing team. I'm not saying they're going to be incredible to watch, but I just think they've got enough in that squad to maybe avoid the usual kind of real struggles that they have where they're just getting battered every week for at least a good 6 weeks. Players are ranting at half time and kicking the touch, kicking the advertising hoardings and stuff like that. I just think this might be a bit of a calmer season now under the guidance of Goitom.
They had the worst home record last season, just one win at home and picked up 8 points in front of their own fans. But they had the 7th best away record, including winning the last 4 away from home for Degerfors. You've got them in 11th this season. The team in 12th place, I can never, ever get these guys right week to week. I always struggle with them. One of the hardest teams to get regular information about as well, I always think, Jonathan. I give up with this lot. So Brommapojkarna in 12th. Tell us about them.
Yeah, what to expect from Brommapojkarna, you just never know. And it feels like a quirk of nature to me when I look back at last season's table and I see where they finished, because I thought they had an okay season, really, all intents and purposes, but they ended up finishing 12th. And, at one point they were really quite close to relegation. Whereas for quite a lot of the games I watched, I thought, they're a decent team. So they're always a mixed bag. Like you say, you don't quite know what you're going to get. They ended up outside the relegation by playoff by 2 points. So that's what I mean. It was like one game in it, when for a lot of the time, there were games, like I say, where I thought they were decent. Picked up some sort of big wins at certain points in the season at times, but just really tailed off towards the end of the year. Had certain games, I think middle of the season, they were really good. I think they went on a run of about 4 wins in a row at one point, which essentially helped keep them up. 3-4 wins in a row, I think it was. And, had some sort of, big performances, like when they beat Sirius 3-0 away. But media's got them to be in the relegation playoffs this season. I think they'll have a slightly better season. The squad isn't amazing. They have lost some big players, but I still think they've got enough. I think they've got at the back, they've managed to keep the likes of Callis. Well, they've got Bjorkander, Kallisir, Timothy Anderson, Zanden. So I still think they've got maybe just about enough in there. They've got their famous academy, which is always very good. For some reason, Steve, in the last few years, BP have always had really good goalkeepers. So someone like you, I'm surprised that you're not watching them more, being such a fan of goalkeepers as you are. The next one this season, probably Leo Cavalius, is someone who's been talked about a little bit, 21 years old. And they've got a good mix of goalkeepers there that they can choose from. Big signing, I think, in midfield, Simon Strand is one. Sorry, but a big signing I mean by that is Oliver Berg from Malmö, who never quite fitted at Malmö. Just too many cooks in that midfield area, and he didn't really get many chances. Played as a false nine at times, but he's come in and he's getting on a bit now. He's 32, but I think he's someone who could do quite well there. Kevin Ackerman, as well as a player in midfield who's always been very highly rated. He's still only 24, which is incredible. Just shows you how long he's been around the block. I remember him when he was like a 17-year-old that everyone thought was going to have a huge career. He had some quite serious injury, health problems around that time, but he had quite a good season last year, I thought. Up front, they've lost a few, but they've gained a few as well. They're a club that always finds a striker or finds a talent, usually from their academy, but even when it's not from their academy, they manage to sort of poach players and find good talents. If you want good examples of that, Steve, you just have to look at who they sold. Last season, they sold Ezekiel Alado to Philadelphia Union for €4 million, who I thought had quite a few rough edges about his game. I didn't think he was as good as some people on Twitter used to go on about. But he is a decent player and he's got the fundamentals, and at 21-ish is someone who's got some potential. I think Philadelphia Union have probably got bought potential there. But, he had a bit of a breakout season, started really well the season, and then I thought he tailed off a bit, but managed to still get his big move. Siwan Cambo, they've lost. Evan Hovland, they've lost. And Love Aho from their academy, who was a very highly rated player. He's gone to Frankfurt for 4.6 million. That deal was agreed a long time ago. He came into their squad at 16. They've also lost Alo Irandust, who's gone to China, who I always quite like. But as I say, some of the players they brought in there, likes of Berg, there's others like Courage Otekwefor from Ghana Accra Lions. So he could be someone to keep an eye on. Strand, as I mentioned, is a signing, who'll bring experience from Hammarby. So, yeah, I think they've just got enough to stay up. Let's put it that way. They're always a team that you can never predict who's going to break out, who's going to play week to week. Sometimes they rotate it. But they are, from that point of view, I do find them quite an entertaining side. They're one of the lesser Stockholm teams, but they also have quite a historic sort of, story about them, Brommapojkarna.
Yeah, I mean, I do watch them a lot, actually. I'm with you. I never get them right, though. They're very unpredictable. That Alado was such a frustrating player last season. He never scored in the matches you expected him to score in. And yet he got goals against some of the better teams. Now, that's not good for betting on. That's not good for when you're sorting your fantasy out. So I'm glad he's gone. But they always find someone that scores a lot of goals, don't they? Brommapojkarna. It was Vazic a couple of years ago before he got that injury. And yeah, you're right. Thinking about it, they always get a goalkeeper out of nowhere. So yeah, and a very interesting team to watch. But you never know what you're going to get with them. Another team with a poor home record last year, and they often do have a poor home record, don't they? 11 defeats out of 15 at home, no draws. The only team at home not to have a draw last season. But they're good away from home. They've always been like good counter-attacking team, haven't they? Brommapojkarna, that sort of thing. Dangerous side on the day. You've got them in 12th this season. We still haven't talked about any of the promoted teams. There's 3 newly promoted teams, and you've got them in your bottom 4. But we are starting with one now in 13th position. It's a welcome back to all of the promoted clubs, actually, to Allsvenskan. You can now reveal who you have in 13th spot.
Yeah, and it's a welcome back to Kalmar FF, of course, after their promotion last season. Their big relegation the year before, and it was sort of sad to see them go. But they've only had one season down in the doldrums of the Superettan, and they've returned. So congratulations to Kalmar, and it's good to see them back. I've got them to just about be okay in 13th place. I think they'll just about keep their head up above water. It's always a challenge coming back from Superettan to Allsvenskan. I think the gap is, it's not a huge gap, but I think it is still challenging. We've seen teams sort of struggle to bridge it. But I do think Kalmar, with their history, with their sort of tradition of being an Allsvenskan club, I think the fans will enjoy being back, and I just think they'll have enough to outright survive. So yeah, I've got the media. A lot of media think they'll go straight back down. They've got them in 15th, but I'm going for 13th, and I think they'll just about survive.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they came straight back up. I mean, of that, they've lost quite a bit of the core of that team, haven't they? That came up. By the looks of things, it could be a bit of a challenge for them, maybe to replace them or get into the same sort of rhythm again for Kalmar. But they are quite a big club, really, aren't they? Let's be honest. Historically, I think they won the league back in about 2007-ish period, I think, off the top of my head. It was one in the early days when I used to get into Scandinavian football. And, decent stadium, good fans. It's going to be a big challenge for them, though, isn't it, to avoid this drop? What makes you think they can avoid even getting in the playoff?
From my point of view, I mean, they've lost a big name in Jibril Sose, who's gone to Slavia Prague for 3 million. That's a massive transfer out. And, he's only 19 years old, so he must be a bit of a talent there. I don't know a huge amount about him because of obviously where he was last year in terms of his history and things like that, Steve. But he obviously at Kalmar did enough to get a big move. I still think they've got quite a good spine. I think they've got quite a few interesting players. He played 26 games for them last season in the Superettan, 24 in the league and 26 in total, and scored 3 goals. And like I said, that's a big money move. So it's a blow for them to lose him. On the flip side, they've been able to bring in a couple of players to replace him and sort of spend some of that money. And I think that's maybe where they hopefully can be okay. One of the players that I think, if my computer will load, is... sorry, Steve. Yeah, I mean, in terms of players they brought in, Victor Larsson as a centre-back from Värnamo. He was one of the better performers in that sort of terrible performing Värnamo side who just sort of plundered out of the league with a bit of a whimper. They've got a young player from Ajax called Nassef Churak who could be one to watch. So they spent a little bit of cash in some different positions. An interesting transfer, Steve, that I'm going to be quite keeping my eye on is Charles Sago Jr. He's come in from Arsenal under 21s. You don't often see loanees from the Premier League heading to Sweden. So he's in Arsenal's academy, a bit old for an academy player now, 21, really. He shouldn't be in an academy at that age, in my opinion. Or he should at least be looking to get first team minutes, and he's gone out and done that in Kalmar. So let's see how he gets on there, and I think that's an interesting bit of scouting. So I think with the likes of Larsson, Sago Jr., they've got some players who can help. If you look at, players, maybe others to keep an eye out for, then I think there's one or two others. The manager, Tony Koskela, is quite highly rated as well. So I think he's someone who can do well. Samuel Brolin is a decent keeper. Steve, I think there's a few things to be optimistic about with them. I think they've got a little bit of ability. They will struggle in games. At the end of the day, I've got them in, quite low down the table. So it's not like I'm expecting them to be incredible. But players like Seitra, Brody Janssen, Brolin, like I say, Soderback, I think is not a bad player. So there's a big Finnish influence, by the way, in this club because of maybe the manager, of course, Koskela. So yeah, I think they've got players like Gojani on the bench. Maybe can come in. He's 33. The squad is there's a lot of players who've they've gone down and come back up again, and I think that maybe will help them. They've got Allsvenskan experience, and so yeah, that's why I'm having them where I've got them.
Bro, I've only just noticed they've got Brolin as the keeper. That's a really good keeper, actually. I mean, at one point he was really highly rated when he was at IFK. What's happened to him to have to go down to the Superettan? That's remarkable, in my opinion. Definitely a good keeper for him there. Kalmar did win the league in 2008, by the way. Was the year they won the league. Got the actual formation and starting 11 that won them that league. Henrik Rydström was in the midfield that day, and there was a couple of Elms, of course. They used to live and breathe the Elms, didn't they? Did Kalmar.
So there is quite a history at this club. We wish them well for 2026, and they're the last team that you think will avoid relegation trouble, because in 14th spot here, this is the playoff, of course, a team which is, well, it's always going to be sort of in relegation sort of battles, isn't it? Not a side that I'm particularly fond of, it must be said. In 14th, Jonathan, you got in the playoff this year.
Yeah, well, just to finish off on Kalmar, Steve, you spoke about the Elms that they used to have. Ironically, Steve, this is one year they don't have a Brazilian. So that was always the theme. It was always an Elm and a Brazilian, but no random Brazilians in their squads this year. So Magashi is also one I think is a decent player on his day, but he's not quite maybe had the career I expected. But yeah, in one place below them, Steve, the only other guaranteed team who is not going down, in 14th, I've got Halmstad. Now, they finished 11th in the end last season, but that kind of, when I look back at it, that surprises me because, again, it was a team that didn't really feel like an 11th place team, if that makes sense. But as I say, there was very little separating a lot of those clubs down the bottom, and it was just the case that Halmstad went on a bit of a run towards the end of the season, I think, which got them out of it with 35 points in the end, and got them into a sort of fairly comfortable position. They only were below Häcken on goal difference, in fact, so they even could have finished 10th. But yeah, I've got Halmstad, Steve. I think that the media's got them to be 13th. I think they'll be in the relegation playoff. They have made some interesting signings from my point of view. Players who maybe have fallen a bit off the beaten track and have something to prove. One of them being Omar Farai, who's come from Zamalek. Steve, he's been around the block in Allsvenskan, and it's not quite worked out for him. So he has come back. He was at Degerfors. He was at Oikor for a while. He's gone out to Egypt and he's come back, and he's got a bit of a track record about him. So I think he could be someone who does well there. He's obviously looking to revive his career. Rami Kaib has come in from Elfsborg. The left back, who's, again, I think is the one who's maybe at times flattered to deceive in his career. I think he's maybe had more ability than he's shown at some stages. The other one I'm really interested about is Hussein Karnil, Steve. Another one who's fallen off the beaten track. I don't know what's happened to him. I know he had injury problems, but this kid was really highly rated at IFK in the academy. And then he got quite a really bad injury one season when he was sort of 17, 18, 19. Ended up being released, I believe, and then has gone out to Spain, Athletic San Luqueño. I don't even know what league that is. It might even be the third division of Spain. And then he's now come back and he's 22 and he's at Halmstad. So he's someone that I think, with a bit of game time and maybe in a bit of a less pressure environment, without the wonder kid tag on him, he could be an interesting player for Halmstad and maybe someone that will help keep them up. But otherwise, Steve, I think one of their main players that I thought was probably arguably their best player, really, Vinicius Nogueira. He's gone to Bulgaria. Ludo Goretz signed him. Pavel Shrupala has gone to Egerson. Blair Turgut has left the league as well. He departed. He was there for a little bit. Videsheim Paul, someone I didn't always really rate, he's gone. Granath has gone. So there's big changes here. Tim Erlenson's gone. In fact, massive changes really to the squad. Losing Kurtulus is a big blow. Naeem Mohammed's gone, who at times looked quite good. He's gone out, I think, to South Korea potentially. So there's massive changes really. Granath at times was all right. He's got to move to Mjällby. So there's massive changes to this squad, Steve, which is a bit of a worry potentially. The big money signing that they've brought in is Erko Tuglas from SC Flora. He's an Estonian centre-back. And also they signed a player called Rocco Asconi from Nordsjælland. So he's 22, plays in midfield. So we'll see how he gets on. But yeah, I think Halmstad are sort of maybe quite tough to predict where they'll be. But I think one thing you can guarantee about them is that they at home they can pull out a result. They always seem to flatten one of the big boys. If you look at the back end of the season, they had some incredible results, beating Hammarby, beating Oikor away to stay up. But yeah, we'll see how they get on. Had a Swedish Cup, they had a few defeats, weren't amazing, and I think in the end, Asconi is probably someone they're going to come in and look to be key in that midfield. And I think all in all, Steve, Tim Ronning is still there as well. He's had an up and down career. I think they'll just about borderline be in that playoff.
I'm getting bad vibes about them. Just looking at the player ins and outs, I mean, it's crazy the amount of changes there is. That doesn't usually go well for teams in my experience, especially when we're dealing with, in the lower reaches of the table. I was going to mention Rasmus Wiedesheim-Paul, who actually was on loan last season in the Superettan and scored 13 goals. You'll be shocked to hear. But he's now moved to Roda in the Netherlands, of course. Halmstad, it's that home record sometimes saves them, doesn't it? It's a horrible place to go, the grass pitch. And I agree with you. I think they'll struggle here, Halmstad, this season. You've got them in 14th place. Now, in 15th spot, it is obviously one of the newly promoted sides. And I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to coming out on TV this summer is House of the Dragon. Jonathan, I don't know if you watched that. A spin-off from Game of Thrones.
No spoilers, not seen it.
Spin-off from Game of Thrones. And, that kind of ties in with this team because this is Västerås.
Yeah, bottom two for me. Probably, I think there's a potential that I'm being a bit harsh on both of these teams because I'm probably factoring in more the difficulty of coming up. I'm looking at teams like Osters from last season and how much they battled and fought and scrapped and scraped and just didn't quite make it. So I do feel a little bit sorry for these two teams where I've got them because I'm not offering much hope. Yeah, but unfortunately I've got Västerås and Örgryte bottom two.
Yeah, I mean, they've come up. Obviously, Västerås won the Superettan last season. They did have Kalle Karlsson in charge. The last time they were in the Allsvenskan, the expected points table, I think, had them in the top 6 or 7, but they ended up rock bottom. They missed an incredible amount of chances. One of the biggest ever underachievements in front of goal for XG that I've ever seen in any league anywhere. Let's see how they do this time around. They've got a new manager called Alexander Rubin. Now, I don't know if it's a good or a bad sign, but on Wikipedia, you can't even click on his name. Do you know what I mean? When it's someone who's not that well known. But he comes from the internal setup, I do believe, Alexander Rubin. So he should know the club pretty well. That's a positive, surely.
Yeah, I think from that point of view, well, the first thing to say is obviously, I think losing Kalle Karlsson is a big factor in why I based my prediction on them. I think that's just a hammer blow. Rubin is meant to be highly rated, actually. So there's the potential that he could surprise people. And, he's a young coach. He's 36. Maybe that's not young in Allsvenskan days because obviously Martin Falk at Norrköping, who took them down, was 29 when he got the job. So maybe 36 these days is a bit of you might be a spring chicken, but you're not the babe.
Dinosaur now, isn't it? 37.
You're not the babe on the block. But yeah, I really am factoring a lot of this on Kalle Karlsson leaving. He, like you said, he had such a good reputation that first year, so much that we even got him on the show. There was big links, like I said at the top of the show, moving in with moves to Scotland. At one point, I think Hearts wanted him and MLS teams wanted him, and then he sort of stayed for one more year at Västerås and got them promoted. Finished the job and then got his move to Hammarby. So fair play to him for sort of like seeing it through, if that makes sense. One of the things he was very good at was that recruitment side of things, and I think obviously Rubin will have been part of that environment. So I think that gives him maybe something to hope that he can adapt. But I just think it's a very tough ask. You look at the squad, you got players like Lushaku who've come in, Wernersson, Unsabayu, who I thought in flashes looked okay during their Allsvenskan year a couple of years ago. They've got the likes of Jonathan Ring, who's a bit old now but brings experience. But I just think that when I look through the squad, Buda is obviously the one that a lot of people will, maybe hang their hat on and say if he's going to get goals, then that could keep them up. And then they've got some unknown talents. I mean, Geffert is also quite good on his day. But yeah, I just think the squad is quite the good players are players that kind of are like Buda, for example, are a bit hit and miss. He does go a bit streaky at times. He can be someone who gets goals and goes on runs. But he's come back from Japan. He's on loan. He was at Hammarby before. Geffert as well. I just think the players that you're really relying on are players that are not necessarily guaranteed to do the business week in, week out. Lushaku as well, someone who's come from Norrköping. He's another one who's got maybe a bit to prove, in my opinion. So Baggerson is also coming from North. So this is a bit of a Norrköping kind of like exodus. All the Norrköping refugees basically who have gone into exile have wound up in Västerås, trying to revive their Allsvenskan careers. But Fagerström's not a bad goalkeeper, by the way. Bonder at the centre back as well. He's come from Östersund. But yeah, I just don't see a huge amount of quality. And sometimes I think when you buy players who've been relegated, you know that tag of like back-to-back relegations that some players just end up getting. And I'm just wondering if some of these Norrköping players might be in for another year of struggle.
Yeah, you got them in 15th place, one above Örgryte. I mean, really, with Örgryte, it's the story of the club is probably the thing to focus on more than anything, because there's incredible history here, Jonathan, which I'm sure you're going to tell us about. It's the first ever time that we have been able to talk about Örgryte in the Allsvenskan on this podcast. And, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing them in the division, actually. They, you lived out there in Gothenburg. You're familiar with the club, the fans. Tell us more about them, because this is just not a bog standard boring club, is it?
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. This is landmark stuff here. We've done this podcast for close to 10 years.
Yeah.
And never have they been mentioned. We had Lockdown Steve, where I had my famous Football Manager, still on YouTube somewhere, that Football Manager series with Örgryte, trying to revive them on Twitch in lockdown days. So this is a team that's close to my heart from a Football Manager perspective, certainly. And they are, like you say, it's a fairy tale club. I mean, it's a bit like when GAIS came back to the league a few years ago. And especially for someone who's sort of been around the Gothenburg football scene, these are giants of the league. You know, a team with 138-year history, Steve. They are 12-time winners of Allsvenskan, or of the Swedish league. First won it in 1896. In terms of Allsvenskan, they've won it twice, but they've been Swedish champions in the 1800s and early 1900s, Steve. They were like the dominant force. They won the league in 1896, 1897, 1898, 1899, 1902, 1904, 1905, 1906, 1907, 1909, 1913. World War probably hindered them. Nothing else till 1985. But yeah, and in between that as well, Allsvenskan in 1925 and 1928. Sorry, 1926 and 1928.
Swedish Cup winner in 2000 as well. And they've won so many different cups down the years, like different Corinthian Bowl, whatever that is. Svenska Mästerskapet. I mean, this is from a century ago now, but it's still brilliant to see.
This is a massive club, and they have also a... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I'm just going to say their trophy cabinet. I mean, some of these trophies must be, obviously very, very old, but it's a big trophy cabinet down the years.
Yeah, they're a massive club, as I said. Historic giants. I think they're one of the founding members of the league, or something along those lines. You know, they're one of, as I say, they dominated the league in the early years, and then they just fell off the beaten track, Steve. And one thing I would say when I was in Gothenburg is, even though they weren't, they've been in the doldrums, they've been in the lower leagues over the past sort of 10, 20 years. They've always still had a bit of clout about them in new competitions. They've got a great academy. A lot of players have come through their academy that we've talked about over this past sort of 5-6 years. We might not have mentioned them by name, but they've played in that Wyss academy. Really nice little sort of little club. Been to visit them, and they've got their little sort of wooden barn where their academy's based. And yeah, it's a really nice club. I really had fun memories of going to watch the academy games and things like that. Always had talents. And it's a team that, it means we've got, like you said, four Gothenburg-based teams in Allsvenskan for the first time in many, many, many a year. And there will be a little mini league there of who's going to finish above who. IFK Göteborg, GAIS, BK Häcken, obviously out there in Hisingen, and Örgryte. Örgryte actually play at the same stadium as the other two, as GAIS and IFK, in Gamla Ullevi. So that's going to be, I think, a logistical challenge probably as well for home games. Good thing it's only a 30-team 30-game season and a 16-team league, with 3 teams sharing a stadium. But yeah, they're massive club. I feel like maybe doing them a bit of a disservice, because being back in the league, there is the potential. So although I've got them as bottom, there is the potential that I have big egg on my face with Örgryte, because although I'm not a massive really fan looking at their signings and some of the players they've lost, I think they're going to struggle from that point of view. They've lost a lot of players. Steve, and some key ones. And that is why I kind of worry about them. On the flip side of it, they are a team that's kind of got that bit of clout and bit of history that the excitement of being back in Allsvenskan, I think, could count for a lot. The question is just, do they have the players to overcome that? We look at some of the signings they've got. Most maybe notable from my point of view is a lad called Michael Parker, an English centre-back from West Brom's academy, that I'm very excited to sort of keep an eye on and just see how that translates from England to Allsvenskan. Rasmus Alm has come in from St. Louis City on a free transfer as well. I think in the summer window they might attract a few more players, because Örgryte is a club that I think they can attract players, but they haven't really, it seems, unfortunately, been able to attract too many big names this time around. Jerome Tibbling Ogwo, he's come back to the club from Asiriska. He's someone who I remember from my Örgryte Football Manager save. But he's 27, Steve, and has never played in the top division. And that's the kind of thing that they're battling against. They've got a lot of players that really aren't sort of maybe huge names at this level. And that is where maybe they're going to have a bit of a challenge in terms of staying up, Steve. And that's really where I worry about them. The manager, Andreas Holberg, has done a fantastic job. And I think he's someone who is quite highly rated again from a managerial point of view. But yeah, just looking through the squad, Tobias Sanders there, but he's 36 now. Obviously, he's been around the block in Gothenburg, especially. But I struggle to see a huge amount of quality in this squad.
Over here in the UK, Bet365 are actually offering a market top Gothenburg club, and Örgryte are priced at 33-1 to be the top Gothenburg club. I think they should be even bigger than that, to be honest. If they finish above if they finish above the likes of GAIS, then they're doing something rather special, to be honest with you. But it's interesting, there is a market set up there. GAIS are the favourites in that market, by the way, at 2.3, and Häcken are the second favourites. You've got all
Bet365?
Bet365 on regional specials. They're also offering top Stockholm club market as well. Brommapojkarna are 40-1 for that.
And who's favourite? Hammarby.
Hammarby at 1.66.
Are there any other left field markets there apart from?
Well, they're offering a few more outrights than normal, like to be relegated. I mean, Örgryte are the big favourites to be relegated. They're 1.5, 1 to 2 favourites to be relegated. That's pretty short. So no one's really giving them a chance. The books aren't giving them a chance. The media's not. You've got them in 16th. But yeah, maybe they can surprise people with. I do know someone that's actually betting on them against a double chance against Malmö first match. Reckons they can catch Malmö cold first match.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
So yeah, that is Örgryte in 16th. I mean, I'm going to follow them with interest. It might be the only chance we have to watch them in Allsvenskan in this tenure. But let's see. That concludes the preview, the Allsvenskan season preview. Well done, Jonathan. You've gone through all the teams there. You've made your predictions. You've not been sitting on the fence. You've gone in hard with some of these predictions, and I'm going to remind people of the table that you predicted, starting from the top, which is Mjällby as champions. You were having Hammarby in second place, GAIS in third, Malmö fourth, Djurgården in fifth, Sirius in sixth, IFK in seventh, and IFK Göteborg in eighth place. You've got Häcken in ninth, Elfsborg 10th, Degerfors, the dizzy heights of 11th. They've never been that high in your predictions before. Brommapojkarna in 12th, Kalmar in 13th, Halmstad 14th, Västerås in 15th, and Örgryte there in 16th. Wow, we've got through it. And I think we've got through it in maybe just under 2 hours, which is not bad going, Jonathan. Well done.
I think it's a bit more than 2 hours, but it might be less than the Itinerary one. But yeah, great to sort of go through all the teams. Let's see how it goes. The season starts immediately. By the time you listen to this, we might even be into week one, depending on when it goes out there. First games, of course, like you mentioned the fantasy team, the fantasy code, Steve, but the first match is massive match on the Saturday, Hammarby Mjällby, which will set the tone. You got Degerfors, Sirius, AIK Halmstad, Kalmar Västerås, Örgryte Malmö, as you've just mentioned. BK Häcken BP, Elfsborg Gothenburg, bit of a local derby or rivalry at least for Elfsborg. GAIS Djurgården on the Monday to get us into the swing of things. So yeah, join the fantasy team, join the fantasy league. Obviously, get involved. Tweet us at Nordic Foot Pod, or you leave a comment on the Spotify or the YouTube. Let us know what you think about this episode. Do you agree with the predictions? You can find me on Twitter at JF Football. You can find Steve at Meatman Soccer. But yeah, I'm spent now, Steve. That's it. Need to lie down.
it's just going to think about. There's so many rivalries in this league this year, like with the teams from cities. There's the intercity rivalry. Like every week, there's going to be at least one big rivalry on the fixture schedule. That just has to be by default. So for those who are interested in following a summer league as well, then get involved with Allsvenskan. There's no VAR. No VAR in Allsvenskan. It's the only one. When a goal's scored, you can celebrate it pretty quickly. So I always enjoyed that. Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode. As Jonathan said, do put your comments in there. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and let us know what your predictions are. But from me and Jonathan, it's going to be goodbye, and stay tuned for more episodes this season. Take care.
Goodbye, everyone.